5. Good afternoon and welcome to the Orange County School Board's work session, which has been scheduled for today for the purpose of discussing ESE, Exceptional Student Education. The public will not have an opportunity to participate at this work session to provide public comment because it's not a regularly scheduled board meeting. No action, and because no action will be taken, and there will be no pre-agenda period in which the public would normally address the school board on germane topics that are related to the work of the school board. The public will have an opportunity to provide input at a future school board meeting, and Dr. Jenkins and her team have conducted a variety of means of gathering public input prior to this meeting. I also want to remind the public that board members will not be engaging in outside electronic or digital communication during the work session so that we can focus our full attention on the meeting itself. And for those of you who are attempting to reach us, please do that either before or in this case after the meeting. We certainly welcome input from the public through all means, but not during our meetings. Board members are in attendance in person and telephonically. So let me do a roll call vote, beginning with Member Gallo. I'm here, Chair. Thank you. Member Lopez.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Member Cobert.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Thank you. Member Gould.
Good afternoon.
Member Felder.
Good afternoon.
Dr. Casterdental.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Member Byrd.
Good afternoon.
All right, thank you. We are all present and accounted for. Because we have 2 members that are participating virtually, we're going to go back to our method of queuing by sending a text message to our General Counsel, Ms. Anval. The text message should contain the letter Q. It doesn't need to contain anything other than the letter Q. And our General Counsel will do her best to put those names up in the order that they appear on her phone, and I will do my best to adhere to that. In a moment, we're going to begin this meeting with a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. But before we do, let me just take this moment to recognize how important today is in the history of our nation, and to recognize that we have lived through some extraordinary times in the last couple of years, the last year, and most particularly in the last couple of weeks. And so as we gather, I would urge everyone to keep in their thoughts and prayers those who work in public office at a state level, local level, and most especially at a national level, as we embark upon the changing of the power of president and recognizing the threat that exists, that all of our personnel that are on the front line, our law enforcement personnel, are safe and well prepared, and that somehow in these difficult times that we as a nation find a way to communicate our differences in a more productive way, without violence and with a spirit of true communication. It's a lot to ask for, but it's what is expected of us, and especially on the heels of Martin Luther King Day, I don't think it could have come at a more important time for us to really reflect on the words of Martin Luther King and the spirit of nonviolence and tolerance, peace. And I also just want to take a moment to recognize that Martin Luther King also understood the incredible value that education brings to society, not just to the individual, but what it brings to society. He recognized that education was more than just about academics. It was about teaching character, and it was about teaching critical thinking skills. And as I think about what has happened in the last week and a half, I think that we need a society that has developed critical, independent thinking skills and does their research and bases their reactions and decisions on fact. And if we had more of that, we would be a stronger, better nation. And without it, given the fact that our citizens elect our leaders, frankly, without it, we're destined to fail as a nation. So for anyone who underestimates the power of public education, the safety and the future of our nation rests on it. With that, let's rise for a moment of silence and then the Pledge of Allegiance. pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, this work session is something that this board, and I know our ESC parents and community have been looking forward to for quite some time. I want to thank Dr. Jenkins and her entire administration for the work that they put into preparing for this. And with that, Dr. Jenkins, I will turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. It is time for our exceptional student education review that we have been preparing for and waiting for. Just a couple of comments before I turn it over to Dr. Gesundheit. Exceptional student education is so vast and so complicated that it is absolutely essential. It's critical to periodically have a review, not just for board members, but for the general public, for individuals who do not have children with exceptionalities, children with unique abilities, as our friend Andy Gardner coined. I think it's important for the general public to understand as well all of the details around exceptional student education. And so today's work session, while it may seem lengthy, it's the presentation alone is around the 2-hour mark. We still, Dr. Vasquez would like for the record to reflect, she still has not beat out John's number, John Morris's number for the facilities review. They still hold the record. But it is so extensive that we think it's time well invested. And so I would ask for your patience to get through all of it. We believe we've answered most of your questions. Staff met with individual board members to make sure we had things covered. There will be time at the end if you'll just keep your questions. Chances are they're going to be answered somewhere in those 72, Dr. Vasquez, is it 72 pages now? Whatever the number was. So she's still going to not exceed John's record. Nonetheless, if you will hold your questions until the end, there's a good chance that they will be answered by staff because we were mindful of those question that you posed in those individual meetings. So about 2 hours worth, and then we certainly can answer any additional questions that were not covered and hear the board's discussion. Sometimes the public does not understand that board members are under the sunshine. They've not had an extensive discussion other than a comment here and there when we've had pre-agenda speakers, and so this is a time for the board to have some discussion as well, and then to talk about potential next steps. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started. Dr. Gesundheit.
All right, we are not picking your voice up. And Dr. Jenkins, if I could also ask, because we may have some people that in this presentation that we might not recognize, or the public might not, if everyone could introduce themselves, as you're about to do, Dr. Gesundheit, before they speak. Thank you, Dr. Gesundheit.
Absolutely. So let's begin. Good afternoon. I am Ian Gesundheit, Executive Director for Exceptional Student Education. Good afternoon. I am Ian Gesundheit, Executive Director for Exceptional Student Education. In this position, I lead and manage the ESC department, supervise the principal of ESC Transition School, Hospital Homebound, Esteem Academy, and La Amistad, as well as supervise the senior administrator for the Florida Diagnostic Learning and Resource System Florida Inclusion Network of Central Florida. I'd like to start by sharing about the population we serve. OCPS currently has 20,163 students with disabilities and 11,619 students identified as gifted. Total OCPS population is 31,782. The OCPS ESC department also provides services and support to all charter schools and private schools. The total number of students in public and charter schools is 26,057 students with disabilities and 13,267 students identified as gifted. Private schools are not required to report their numbers to us. The Exceptional Student Education Department provides support and services to a total of 39,524 students in our public and charter schools. This slide shows a percentage breakdown of primary exceptionality. There are students that may have more than one exceptionality. Our largest primary exceptionality is students with a specific learning disability at 39.6% of the population. Next, I will touch on what the role of the ESE department is and what role the schools play for ESE. The individual schools are charged with the implementation and provision of special education services to students they serve. Curriculum, resources, staff, professional development, training, implementation of policy and procedures, scheduling, and parent communication are managed and provided by the site-based managers. Schools are charged with support, supervision, and evaluation of school-based ESE staff. It is a task of the school leadership to manage and support students and staff at the school level. The central office, ESE department, serves as a resource and support for stakeholders in Orange County Public Schools. Any area pertaining to exceptional student education, be it instruction, policy and procedures, scheduling, etc., the ESE department serves as a support system to the school administration, staff, students, and parents. Our goal is to ensure that OCPS students who are served in the exceptional education program have a promising and successful future. In order to realize this goal, it is important to understand that school and district supports work in collaboration with each other. The collaboration between these two areas, along with the participation of our parents, will lead to success of our students, with success being at the highest level of the student's intellectual ability. On this slide, you will see examples that outline our recommended communication flow for parents to follow. If a parent has questions about the progress toward an IEP goal, they would start with the teacher. If the parent is not satisfied or the situation isn't remedied, the parent would follow up with the school staffing. Once the parent and the staffing have met and discussed concerns, we hope the situation is resolved. If it is not, then the parent would meet with the principal. The process would continue if the parent is not satisfied and communicate with the learning community. The process is mirrored for different concerns with a similar flow. If after the parent has reached out to the learning community and there has been no resolution reached, then the parent would or should reach out to the district office. This information has been verbally shared with our parents, and we have placed it on our website as well. Now we will talk about budget, and I would like to introduce Mr. Ernest Jean-Baptiste to present the budget section.
Thank you, Dr. Gunzentite. Good afternoon, board members, Madam Chair, Superintendent Jenkins. My name is Ernest Jean-Baptiste. I'm a senior administrator within the Office of Management and Budget, and I'm here to talk about the ESE aspect of school budgeting. Next slide. So some basics on ESE school funding. So within our Florida Education Finance Program, the FEFP, ESE students are identified by their instructional minutes that they are spending in a classroom for ESE services. Those instructional minutes are categorized by the FEFP in the following FTE programs. Categories 111 are from grades pre-K through 3. FTE program 112 are grades 4 through 8. FTE programs 113 are grades 9 through 12. 111 through 113 are for our gifted students with some slight learning disabilities and varying exceptionalities within grades pre-K through 12. FTE program 254 and FTE program 255 correspond to our highest ESE matrix levels, level 4 and level 5, which identifies the students as severely handicapped. FTE program 255 are those severely handicapped students that require additional health care needs that require assistance with procedures and monitoring. Next slide. This Florida DOE statute 1010.20 paragraph 3 provides direction on the minimum amounts a district must spend on each instructional program. This particular statute speaks to that the district shall spend at least 90% of the funds generated for exceptional students on the aggregate total school costs for such programs. Each September, we file, Orange County submits a cost report to the DOE as part of their annual financial reporting requirements. The Department of Education reviews our results to determine compliance with this statute, and OCPS consistently spends in excess of the 90% threshold requirement. Next slide. On this slide, you can see the percentage of ESC expenditures that were spent as a percentage of revenue over the past 3 years. The Auditor General completes a thorough audit of the district every 3 years, and we have an external financial audit completed every year by an outside CPA firm that indicates that we are indeed spending greater than a 90% threshold. Next slide. In the next 2 slides, I will review in our school funding model how school budgets incorporate their funding. So this table identifies formula-driven funding for schools. These formulas, the table identifies the key data elements that determine ESC funding by program. The DOE assigns factors that we apply to each FTE program to calculate how much additional funding the base FTE should receive. Those are the DOE cost factors. That helps calculate our weighted FTE. For the elementary school funding, as per the DOE, the baseline is the FTE program 112, which has a cost factor of 1.000. So program 111 has a higher factor, and programs 254 and 255 have a factor that's 3 to 5 times more in terms of our weight for funding. In addition to the school funding formulas, we allocate positions as well as ESC guarantee dollars based on a pupil to teacher ratio. So our pupil to teacher ratios are similarly in line with those factors. We have much smaller class size ratio for the 254 and 255 FTE programs, and not only allocate a teacher, which is standard for categories 111 and 112, but we also allocate an additional para to deliver those instructional services required. Next slide. This slide shows similar data elements for our secondary schools, middle schools, and high schools. Once again, showing that the baseline factor is for middle school, category 112, and there are 3 to 5 times more from DOE cost factors for 254s and 255s, and also the appropriate class allocations and class size pupil to teacher ratios. Next slide. Thank you. In addition to ESC school funding based on our formulas, we do provide additional support allocations in the form of a staffing specialist, nurses, therapists, in this example, occupational and physical therapists, and program assistants who serve as job coaches in our high schools. The basis for each of these is identified in the table above, showing that depending on the nature of the support services required, we would provide those additional allocations. Next slide. Thank you. Overall, our ESC guarantee funds are distributed to the schools in the following categories. 63% of the funding are at the school level, that is in their school funding site model, and principals can use as they see fit for the provision of instructional services and materials for ESC students. In addition, the district provides the remaining third is provided at a district level to provide itinerant support services to schools, where 37% is mixed between our speech therapists, itinerant teachers, school psychologists, and hearing and vision teachers.
Thank you, Ernest. In regards to the ESC guarantee funds, ESC program specialists will continue to collaborate with learning community supervisors to review the ESC expenditures within school-based budgets. Area superintendents will continue to progress monitor school-based budgets. We'll now move to Instructional Support Department. This department is under the supervision of the executive director and senior director and is made up of two teams, behavior and instruction and specialized services. The purpose of the instructional support team is to help all schools within OCPS and charter schools with behavioral and instructional strategies. I use the word instruction rather than curriculum, as a curriculum is the standards, either Gen Ed or access points, that is set by the state and cannot be changed. Our role is to help schools with behavioral and instructional strategies to use with their students as they work towards mastery of those standards and the goals outlined in their IEP or EP. Let's talk about the positions and the roles. For behavior support, the team consists of 7 behavior analysts. 1 is designated to each learning community with high school innovation and STO included in the learning community they reside in. 1 is designated to support EBD cluster sites, emotional behavior disordered sites. 1 designated to support 12 intensive self-contained units, 3 separate day schools, and 3 specialized applied behavior analytical private school educational settings. The role of the behavior analyst is to collaborate and consult with school-based teams to develop evidence-based strategies and data collection methods for students with severe behaviors or that are in crisis. Conduct observations and data collection to ensure that variables are identified and when developing strategies. Train and monitor plans, procedures, and skills. The behavior analyst's goal is for students to be successful in the least restrictive environment possible while making gains in behavior, academics, and socialization. It is important for me to mention that when it comes to behavior support, we provide support for all students with behavior concerns in all public schools and charter schools, whether they have a disability or not. There are 16 behavior coaches who are instructional staff members. The role of the behavior coach is to provide support to teachers of students with and without disabilities in the area of behavior, model strategies that facilitate social emotional learning and/or independent functioning skills, build capacity in the school behavior specialists to better support their school, and provide professional development to OCPS teachers and staff, including CPI, PCM, Behavior Specialist Training Series, and Learning Community PLCs. There are 12 program assistants who serve behavior support to schools, and their role is to work directly under the supervision of the behavior analyst and assist in implementing, training, monitoring strategies for students with severe behaviors and those in crisis. For support with instructional strategies, there are 9 instructional coaches who support teachers of students with disabilities. Each coach is assigned to work with 30 to 35 schools. Their role is to support teachers by recommending as well modeling research-based strategies that teachers can implement in their classrooms, respond to requests for individual student support in cases in which additional support or strategies beyond what the teacher is using is needed for an individual student, provide side-by-side coaching to teachers and make visuals to meet the needs of students with disabilities to be successful in the classroom, provide virtual support to assist schools, staff with distance learning and Launchpad at home, provide face-to-face and virtual professional development opportunities and resource to school staff in the areas of access points, autism, learning strategies, support facilitation, and resource. There are 2 instructional coaches for teachers of students who are gifted. One provides support to all elementary schools and the other to all secondary schools. Their role is the same as the other instructional coaches. However, they also coordinate gifted endorsement add-on courses and the universal gifted screening for all second graders. Lastly, there is a resource teacher that serves as an alternative assessment coordinator for all students, approximately 1,800, taking Florida Standards alternative assessment. This is the central office support for behavior, and we delineate the differences in each group. A behavior analyst is certified and degreed. A behavior coach and a behavior specialist are certified teachers with extensive experience in working with challenging behaviors. A program assistant is a classified position that provides support and assistance to the behavior coach and the behavior specialist. This slide compares the number of behavior analysts in other very large districts. As you can see, Orange has the second largest number of analysts working to support our students. This information was compiled by a team calling and emailing individual school districts. While behavior and instruction may appear to have different functions, they both have the same focus when it comes to supporting schools. Examples how this team provides support to teachers of students with disabilities and gifted in the areas of behavior and instruction via side-by-side coaching and modeling of effective behavior and instructional strategies in the classroom. Daily open forums offered virtually for all school staff. These are hosted from 8:15 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. daily. Professional development offered via face-to-face, virtually, and through Canvas courses. The team also assists school teams in determining the appropriate resources for use with their students from the options available on the OCPS Interventions and Diagnostic Tools of 2021. Examples of these types of trainings provided to school staff and parents are included in the next 4 slides. As I mentioned, the team offers to all OCPS and charter staff via online and face-to-face professional development opportunities. The topics on this slide are an example of what the team is currently offering this year in this area. The team also currently offers professional development on strategies specific to behavior as well as gifted. We are continually trying to develop new ways to reach more and more school staff to provide them with strategies that they may need in order for their students to be successful. All students are considered general education students first. They are required by FAPE to have equal access to the same materials and resources as their non-disabled peers. Teachers of students with disabilities also have access to all the same resources as general education teachers. Teachers and support staff are notified of the opportunities available to them in a variety of ways, including 2 widgets above that are located in their Launchpad. The weekly ongoing support widget takes staff directly to ongoing support offered by curriculum and digital learning to all OCPS staff. The ESC ongoing supports widget takes staff directly to the ongoing support offered by us to teachers of students with disabilities and gifted in order to provide them with additional support to help meet the individual needs of their students. This widget contains links to the daily open forums we offer, as well as links to self-paced Canvas courses and resources for the supplemental instruction materials provided to schools, such as reading mastery, corrective reading, unique learning systems / news to you, and Teach Town Basics, to name a few. The team is currently supporting 46 schools using reading mastery and corrective reading to support our students. One of our next steps is to continue to expand the curriculum options available to more schools. The Pre-Planning ESE Virtual Support System link takes you to a spreadsheet that contains all the virtual trainings we offered during pre-planning and was shared in conjunction with all the district-wide professional development offered at that time. The last link at the bottom of the slide is a comprehensive list of ESE-specific professional development opportunities that have been offered or will be offered this school year, and registration is available through the Canvas catalog, just as with all district professional development. A new request to our team this year has been to provide training for parents in addition to all the trainings and ongoing support we provide school staff. While it isn't something that we have had experience with in the past, our team has truly risen up to the challenge trying to fill this need. Parents and caretakers are able to access all the opportunities via the ESE webpage by clicking on the Parent Support and Training Opportunities 2020-2021 widget. This widget takes parents to a Google spreadsheet that contains all past and future trainings, as well as links to the sessions that were recorded. All trainings are also advertised on the ESE Facebook page, as well as via the ESE Instructional Support Twitter account. This slide shows the parent support and webinars that have been provided thus so far this year. We have ESE Instructional Support Team Overview, News to You Parent and Caregivers, Teachtown Basics and Parent Overview, A Day in the Life of Launch Ed at Home for elementary, A Day in the Life of Launch Ed at Home secondary, A Day in the Life of Launch Ed at Home for access points, SEL tips for parents of students with disabilities, self-awareness and management, SEL tips for students with disabilities, responsible decision-making, verbal de-escalation strategies to use during the holidays and other stressful times, Florida Standard Access Points overview for parents, and future topics include navigating the IEP process, transition services, ESE policy and procedures, and preparing for the summer. OCPS purchases district-wide resources for K-12 yearly. Schools may utilize site-based funding to provide additional supplemental interventions from an approved list. Intervention materials are resources that can address the needs of all students, including those within MTSS process, special education, and English language learners. Additional research-based interventions have been purchased through CARE funds. A full list of interventions are provided to schools through memos, professional development, and posted on the MTSS headquarters. The intervention list shares items we have purchased as a district and what is available for schools to purchase to address gaps in learning and student needs. The curriculum team just completed an RFP with the support of teachers, coaches, and administrators to review and update the approved intervention options. This removes barriers for schools who are seeking additional products through site-based budgeting for intervention support beyond what's already provided. And we have an extensive list of available resources that is available digitally. The district currently provides all schools with the following instructional materials for use with students with significant cognitive disabilities: Unique Learning Systems, Teachtown Basics, Early Reading Skills Builders, Teaching to the Standards, and Equals Math. In addition, a list of recommended supplemental materials for schools to use with students with significant cognitive disabilities is also provided. The team continuously seeks out and reviews research-based materials for the use with this population. OCPS has been requiring one-year CPI recertification for the past 5 years. When the state shut down in March, we began to review different areas of our department. In the area of CPI, it was clear we could not provide CPI training nor CPI recertification training without doing the complete assessment face-to-face. By the end of 2019-2020, school year, we had 405 employees losing their one-year certification between March and July, with an additional 980 staff certifications due to expire between August and December. In consultation with the professionals at CPI, it was recommended that we switch to a 2-year recertification through the pandemic due to the large numbers of staff that were due to expire. Once the pandemic is resolved and we do not find ourselves in a threat to close down again, the goal is to return to the 1-year certification. A CPI database is maintained on employees that have been certified in CPI. A team maintains that database. Employees are notified via email prior to their certifying expiring each year. And just to know where it says not applicable in the chart, there is no data for those 2 columns because we were not able to complete face-to-face training during the August through December of 2020. Now, let's review the specialized services team. I will have Senior Administrator Elizabeth Padilla come up and review with the team for us.
Good afternoon. I'm Elizabeth Padilla, the Senior Administrator for Specialized Support, specifically in the area of specialized instruction. The Specialized Instruction Department consists of a team of professionals that provide screenings, evaluations, services, accommodations, and trainings across the district, including our alt-ed and charter schools. Itinerant classified staff include hearing screeners, braillists, interpreters, audiologists, teachers of the deaf, teachers of the visually impaired, speech-language pathologist and therapist, and our assistive technology team. I'd like to briefly explain who and what our support staff does. Overall support staff, they support and assist programs and students as it relates to individual IEP goals, accommodations, services, and MTSS. The support staff includes 8 hearing screeners who provide hearing screenings for schools as part of MTSS and the Florida Department of Health mandated screenings, grades K, 1, and 6. They also ensure that referrals are made to identify possible hearing difficulties. There are 3 program assistants that support OCPS's audiology clinic, speech and language department, and assistive technology programs. These staff support processing of referrals, intercommunications of the program, scheduling appointments for evaluations, managing inventory, data, and statistical collection. The Vision program has 3 braillists who are essential in converting printed materials or digital materials into large print or braille. Additionally, they work with our state discretionary project, FIMC, to utilize additional materials, equipment, and professional development. 2 district sign language interpreters facilitate classroom and school schedules, ensuring students that all students that require a sign language interpreter have access to instruction. Additionally, they assist our ADA department with interpreting schedules. The administrative team includes 4 program specialists who directly work with the speech and language program. As part of efficiently using staff across the district, they assign caseloads, supervise, recruit, provide in-services, therapy materials, and procedural structure to over 200 speech-language therapists. Additionally, 2 occupational therapists serve as leads for the occupational and physical therapy department. They provide oversight of the department and communicate with school-based and contract therapists. The largest part and most essential part of specialized instruction are the instructional staff. These 228 specialized staff work in an itinerant role throughout the district, providing specialized services. The assistive technology team consists of 3 resource teachers and 2 speech pathologists. They are essential in providing in-services, evaluations, collaborating with school teams, and problem-solving communication and academic barriers across the district for any student with a disability or a suspected disability. 6 audiologists support the district. They support schools and students with suspected or documented hearing loss. They are the experts for hearing aids and hearing aid technology and best practices. With this expertise, they provide in-services to help school teams better understand hearing aid technology. Additionally, they evaluate, provide assistive technology equipment, and monitor students' hearing. There are 19 itinerant teachers of the deaf who support the MTSS process, evaluations, and services to students that are deaf and hard of hearing across the district. A critical area of recruitment is teachers of the visually impaired. OCPS is fortunate to have 10 teachers of the visually impaired, 4 of whom are certified in orientation and mobility. These teachers support the MTSS process, evaluations, and services to students that are visually impaired across the district. Another critical need area identified by the state are speech-language therapists. Currently, OCPS has 188 itinerant speech-language therapists. These staff support the MTSS process, evaluations, and services to students with disabilities throughout the district. With this number, 11 staff are diagnosticians who provide bilingual evaluations and coaching for staff. Speech and language therapists support MTSS process, evaluations, and services to students with disabilities. These district-based staff are utilized efficiently across the district when providing IEP services to students that have been identified as speech and/or language impaired. School assignments are based on the need of student population and the clinician's skills. The average caseload ranges between 55 and 65 students, depending on the severity of the caseload. Speech-language therapists serve approximately 12,000 students with speech and language impairments throughout the district. They provide IEP services to students such as consultation, collaboration with school staff, support facilitation, direct one-on-one, and small group services. In the times of Launch Ed, speech therapists have integrated online tools and resources, blended face-to-face students with online students to continue the services identified on the students' IEPs. Teachers of the deaf support the MTSS process, evaluations, and services to students that are deaf and hard of hearing throughout the district and charter schools. There are approximately 400 students in Orange County that have IEPs for deaf and hard of hearing. The teachers of the deaf, in addition to instructing students based on state standards, provide troubleshooting hearing aid problems and consult with OCPS audiology staff, progress monitor students' academics and IEP goals, support each student accessibility, language development, self-advocacy. Additionally, they have a strong focus on virtual accessibility and post-secondary opportunities as part of our department goals. During a school year, historically, audiologists have provided over 1,250 in-office evaluations and over 1,300 school visits. In the grand scope, these evaluations and services allow students to better access their instruction. In collaboration with the audiologists and their oversight, hearing screeners historically screen over 52,000 students a year. This achieves 2 objectives: complying with the Florida Department of Health's requiring of screenings grades K, 1, and 6, and providing a level of MTSS by determining if hearing is a factor with a student that may not be achieving academically. Sign language interpreters provide communication access to students who are deaf or hard of hearing by faithfully and accurately representing the classroom instruction, teacher-student dialogue, and relevant sound information in the mode of communication used by the students. Interpreters give communication access to instruction in real time as their peers have. Current OCPS interpreters have taken the Educational Interpreter Performance Assessment. 11 have a score between 2.8 and 3.2. 9 have a score between 3.3 and 3.7. And 1 has a score of 3.8 or higher or national certification. Assistive technology consists of different devices and/or techniques, depending on the individual needs of the student. When a student is formally assessed and found in need of assistive technology, the assistive technology team will train the student and staff in the use of the device or the technique. The school team is then responsible to train the parents, or a request can be made to the district ESC department to provide the training to the parent. These are a few of the trainings that were provided last year, which were district, school, and student focused. In the time of COVID, online resources for teachers were supported and promoted. There was a substantial increase in the use of these resources. 348 BoardMaker online new accounts were created for teachers and therapists. In the area of accessible instructional materials and accommodation supports, Universal Protocol for Reading Accommodations, referred to as UPAR, 120 educator accounts were created and 402 student protocols were used. Based on the UPAR, 301 students were identified to benefit from auditory reading accommodations. Auditory accommodations is new to state testing this year, and it is anticipated that over the next few years to show an increase in student learning gains. Last year, the assistive technology team provided 673 direct services to students. Over 220 teachers were trained in strategies, use implementation of assistive technology. They visited 507 school sites between August and March. They had 2,444 virtual meetings to provide multiple instructional supports during the initial phase of school closures in March to May. Lastly, Learning Ally provides audiobooks for students identified with dyslexia and learning disabilities. All OCPS schools are registered with Learning Ally. Student accounts for the 1920 school year were 547, with an additional 90 students accounts being added during the distance learning. Vision services support the MTSS process, evaluations, and services to students that are visually impaired across the district. There are approximately 100 students in OCPS that have IEPs for vision services. The teachers of the visually impaired, in addition to instructing students based on state standards, provide troubleshooting digital accessibility for students, making recommendations for assistive technology that will assist the students in accessing their instruction, support each student's accessibility to class assignments and tests. For students that learn through tactile means, these teachers instruct students to learn and become fluent in Braille. Additionally, post-secondary opportunities are a focus as part of our department goals. Orientation and mobility services teach students how to access their school campus and community. These are primarily our students that are blind with white canes. They work hand in hand with test development and student achievement to coordinate the needed accommodations for large print and Braille students. Related services help students with disabilities benefit from their special education by providing extra help and support in needed areas. Two services that fall into the related services categories are occupational and physical therapy. These services include evaluation for deficits, which interfere with functions in the area of fine motor, postural control, perceptual motor skills, self-help, attentional challenges. They provide strategies and support for students to access their curriculum. They look at things such as abnormal reflexes, abnormal motor control, restricted joint mobility, and lower extremity strength and coordination. They provide adaptive equipment to allow the student to access his or her educational environment and consult with school staff. They support student skill development through the MTSS process. Assistive technology has the charge to support students with disabilities and their teachers, so appropriate accommodations and technology will allow students to access the curriculum. With this focus, students have increased meaningful classroom participation and communications, access to rigorous content, decreased behaviors, and increased learning gains on FSA and FSAA.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Before we move on to ESE supplemental services, I wanted to talk about some next steps for related services. During the pandemic, an attempt to provide in-house contracted services for occupational therapy and physical therapy were considered. The contracted company was not ready at that point to move in that direction. Talks with them are back on the table to see if there is a possibility to make this happen. There will also be a letter going out to parents to address additional recovery services due to loss of skills. In the area of launch pad for students with significant disabilities, we will review the possibility of adding more flexible schedules online. Also, in an effort to build a more robust hospital homebound program, current hours of services were reviewed, and it has been determined that we need to increase the number of hours per week for students enrolled in hospital homebound if it fits the student's needs. We will now move on to our ESE Supplemental Services Department. There are 7 areas under the ESE Supplemental Services Department and 47.5 staff who serve in the different areas. These areas include Charter School ESE Services, ESE State Reporting Office, FTE funding for students with disabilities, ESE Technology maintains our data collection and databases, Individual Disabilities Education Act, IDEA federal grant, McKay Scholarship, Gardner and PIP Office, McCade School Match Program, and non-public services for private schools, the IDEA proportionate share. ESE Supplemental Services is comprised of 7 areas, 6 of which are governed by the federal and/or state laws. Non-public services. The district has 2 important responsibilities mandated by IDEA regarding the support of students with disabilities attending private schools or homeschooled, not including OCPS or OCPS home education students. Number 1, provide equitable services as mandated by IDEA 2004. A student must attend a nonprofit school to receive equitable services. Number 2, identify, locate, and evaluate students not in public school who are in need of special education as mandated by IDEA 2004 Part B. We comply with IDEA federal law through the Non-Public Services Office located at Fort Gatlin. We have 15.3 personnel supports for private schools, 2 school psychologists, 1 staffing, 1 lead resource teacher, 2 diagnostic resource teachers, 2 professional learning resource teachers, 6 speech and language pathologists, and 0.3 social workers. Responsibilities of all evaluators, such as the school psychologists, resource teachers, and speech and language, and pathologists and social workers are to schedule and administer evaluations in timelines and submit reports. They're also to attend meetings, track students in Access database, consult with parents and school by phone, via email, or virtual, collect data from parents and schools. In addition, resource teachers and speech and language pathologists serve as case managers, process parent requests and review documents received from parents and schools, administer screenings including hearing, vision, BVAT, speech, language, academics, and answer calls from parents and schools that come through the helpline. On average, annually, the team fields over 1,000 phone calls and sends out over 300 parent packets who are requesting an evaluation and a reevaluation. They conduct on average 380 screenings, over 200 evaluations, and attend over 350 meetings. Screening approximately takes 15 minutes to 1 hour, and evaluations from 1 to 4 hours. For charter schools, the district provides the following personnel who support charter schools in various capacities of ESE and 504: school psychologists, language diagnosticians, mental health counselors, social workers, and district staffing. We also have ESE state reporting. The ESE State Reporting Office monitors ESE data in all public schools and charter schools for data entry errors. They provide resources to schools and district staff through live virtual trainings, learning labs, step-by-step processing documents for Skyward, and meeting one-on-one with personnel as requested. The State Reporting Office works with the schools to make the corrections for all 8 surveys, including surveys 2 and 3 for FTE that occur throughout the year. This impacts funding of the school district for students with disabilities. Another area is manages and maintains Medicaid billing. The Medicaid Certified School Match Program allows the school districts to access Medicaid benefits of Medicaid-eligible students with disabilities who receive specialized services and transportation to access these services at their school. There are 2 parts to this project: administrative claiming and fee for service. This is monitored and maintained through our vendor and our Medicaid department to ensure we maximize our revenue available to the district. Individual with Disabilities Education Act grant. The Individual with Disabilities Education Act is a federal statute that governs the education of students with disabilities and related services. This department oversees a federal grant to ensure that all expenditures are appropriate and support students with disabilities and their needs. IDEA makes available a free and appropriate public education to eligible children with disabilities throughout the nation and ensures special education and related services to those children. The most current regulations were revised in 2006. The resources teachers on this team provide professional development opportunities to staff members from private schools are above. The topics on the slide are examples of what the team is currently offering this year to private schools. We will now move to our ESE Policy and Procedures Department. Senior Administrator Danielle Barney will review this department for you. Danielle?
Good afternoon. My name is Danielle Barney, and I am one of the senior administrators who supports in the Policy and Procedures Department. The goal of this department is to build a high level of capacity with all stakeholders to ensure all students receive a free, appropriate public education and move toward future success. This department is a 45-member team. There are program specialists and support staff within each learning community who are responsible for supporting schools with establishing a service delivery model for their student population, our parents and advocates, and placement of students who transfer to OCPS in and out of state. There are also program specialists who support STO and charter along with Section 504. The monitoring and support for Section 504 is also included within this department, and I will touch more on that support later in the presentation. There are also 3 support staff team members who are responsible for verifying data entry from the school level, indexing and scanning all ESE records district-wide, along with taking parent and school calls. The instructional staff are spread throughout the district, covering approximately 10 schools, each for the purposes of compliance and monitoring. In addition to monitoring schools to ensure compliance, this department also handles all of the ESE dispute resolution. We work closely with our legal team to resolve due process cases filed by both the parent and the district. In the due process filings, we are typically successful with holding resolution meetings to resolve several of the filings, therefore, no hearing is required. We also work collaboratively with the Florida Department of Education to address any state complaints alleging any IDEA procedural or state statute violations filed by parents. Last year, out of over 31,000 students with disabilities and gifted, 25 cases were filed, with 9 resulting in corrective action. Year to date this year, 11 cases have been filed. 3 have resulted in corrective action. We are still awaiting the outcome of the other 7 cases. Examples of typical corrective actions we have received include the retraining of school personnel and compensatory services. New this year is our local complaint process, where parents have the opportunity to file a complaint at the local level at their school or within the learning community, in lieu of filing one with the Florida Department of Education. To ensure compliance moves forward, schools district-wide are provided with ongoing professional development regarding procedural updates, Florida statute changes, and refreshers so that they are equipped to support our students with disabilities. Trainings are provided as a whole through district-wide training, school-specific trainings based on trends, or requests from principals, and also within learning communities based on trends. We also offer additional trainings in collaboration with fiddlers. In addition to professional development, we also support schools directly with compliance monitors. Our compliance monitors visit schools and assist with ensuring compliance was followed during ESE eligibility meetings, IEP development, reevaluation meetings, data entry, and FTE tracking, just to name a few. They also provide side-by-side coaching and modeling to build capacity on each campus. School principals are provided a monthly compliance report, which gives an overview of the state of ESE regarding compliance. As I mentioned earlier, this department also provides a training, monitoring, support, and guidance for Section 504. Ongoing professional development regarding Section 504 updates, statute changes, and refreshers are provided district-wide, school-specific, and by learning community based on trends. Schools are also provided with a Section 504 compliance monitor whose role mirrors that of the ESE compliance monitor. The department is supporting approximately 10,000 students district-wide with Section 504 plans. In collaboration with the Transportation Department, we ensure students with disabilities are transported to and from school safely. Some of the transportation discussions involve climate control buses, private transportation, bus monitors, rapid transportation, equipment such as lap restraints and vests, just to name a few. Transportation attends several IEP and Section 504 meetings to ensure that compliance is met while transporting students to and from school. Ongoing professional development for school staffing specialists is critical in order for schools to remain in compliance with current federal and state policy and procedures. This slide contains an example of the current training provided to school staffing specialists.
Come up and review this team.
Good afternoon. Within the ESE Transition Department, there are a total of 84 team members that represent 2 separate departments and the ESE Transition School. There are 25 support staff that include 5 clerical and 20 student support staff. There are 2 administrators to supervise the departments. In total, there are 55 instructional staff between the ESE Transition School and the Preschool Diagnostic Intervention Services Department. There are 2 professional staff who are school psychologists that conduct evaluations on children at the Preschool Diagnostic Intervention Services Department. The ESE Transition School is the largest special day school in Orange County Public Schools. The focus of the school is to gain employability that leads to full paid employment. The average enrollment over the last 5 years is 170 students. They're with disabilities aging between 18 to 22 years old, and they have deferred their diploma. The students are learning job skills at 8 local businesses and through Launchette at Home. The school has 15 business partners. 7 of those remain closed at this time due to COVID. These business closures require the development of 8 work experience labs. These labs allow students to continue the rigorous and authentic job training the students would have gotten at the businesses. In preparation for Launchette at Home, student learning packets were distributed in the spring of 2020. We delivered 40 student laptops and hotspots when needed to students with no digital access. The team worked quickly to align the job tasks performed at the businesses with the tasks learned in the work experience labs. The team also developed an online career experience course in Canvas to be used daily. This online course reinforces skills needed to learn online. We purposely built this course to help our students go from face-to-face to launch ed in the event that that change had to occur quickly. The ESC Transition School also has 2 classrooms at the Special Hearts Farm, which has a facilities use agreement with Orange County Public Schools. The Special Hearts Farm provides adult day training, supported employment, and possible entrepreneur business opportunities relating to farming and gardening experiences. Participants are trained to perform jobs including livestock care, woodworking, gardening, and making goat milk soap. Contact the farm to receive more information regarding funding and daily rates. In addition to operating the ESE Transition School, staff provide high schools with support with career-related courses. This work helps high schools promote graduation and avoid dropout of students with disabilities. This school year, we have 152 students with disabilities on track to earn an elective career placement credit through paid employment. This enrollment has significantly decreased from prior years due to COVID-19 and business closures. In 2018-19, we had 263 students who were enrolled in career placement. The high school high-tech program is funded through the Able Trust Grant. In high school high-tech, students learn about careers in manufacturing and technology, as well as leadership skills. The students typically stay in the program 3 years. This cohort model builds leadership skills and self-esteem as seniors mentor juniors and sophomores. It is a very strong dropout prevention program. There are currently 518 students with disabilities participating in high school high-tech programs. High schools also offer job training skills to students with disabilities through community-based vocational education. This training takes place on high school campuses and at local businesses. We have 21 business partners providing training opportunities to students with disabilities. This is down from 65 business partners that we had before COVID. The Preschool Diagnostic Intervention Services Department conducts screenings and evaluations of children between the ages of 3 to 5 years to determine the need for ESC services. We have one resource teacher that provides instructional support for 106 preschool ESC classrooms. In 2019-20, there were approximately 3,000 students in either full-day programs or half-day programs. Full-day programs are designed to meet the needs of students with significant behavioral needs or communication delays. The staff also provide parent training for communication behavior challenges to support their child. This training is aligned with the strategies that are used in the classroom. The ESC transition team collaborates with the preschool agencies within Orange County. I also sit on I also serve as an ESC facilities liaison, where I sit on the advanced planning committee, and we review projected student enrollment. We make recommendations for the order of new school site construction for the next 10 years. I identify the need for ESC classrooms and specialized rooms at each school. During design and construction, I review the architectural drawings for age-appropriate room locations to promote inclusion. When it is time to select the furniture and specialized equipment, I work with the facilities lead. The goal in the selection is to promote the student's ability to focus on learning. This specialized equipment is needed for students to gain access to learning and to monitor student evidence of comprehension. The selection of the furniture is geared towards maintaining focus. Here you'll see this team provides professional development opportunities in the areas of transition and to pre-kindergarten ESC staff. An example of the types of training currently offered are shown on this slide.
Thank you, Dr. Austin. We will now move to our Health Services Department. Senior Director Sylvia Schaefer will come up with Michelle to give you an overview of the department.
Dr. Gesundheit?
Yes.
I'm sorry, can, the doctor who just spoke, I know I've met her before, but can you articulate her name a little more clearly for the
Sure.
board?
Dr. Lee Austin.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. We have a new health services director who is an advanced practice registered nurse to oversee the department. The department has 7 district registered nurses, which has increased by 1 from last year. The team also has 1 program specialist. The district nurses and program specialists meet with the director and senior director for the department. This department also maintains the school clinic manual, which is reviewed on a yearly basis. The ESE Health Services Department provides schools support in communicating the timelines and necessary % completion for each of the health screenings required by the Department of Health. Training school-based personnel, community health partners, and district-level staff help perform these screenings in accordance with the provision of the School Health Services Act, Florida Statute 381.0056, requiring that health screenings be conducted at various grade levels. The Florida Department of Health screenings and their results will be documented and placed in the student's cumulative health record folder. Schools are encouraged to complete vision and hearing screenings during the first semester of school, and growth and development screenings and scoliosis can be done throughout the school year. This year, due to the pandemic, our department has collaborated with other departments to provide more staffing to schools to cover both the sick and well clinic rooms. A contracted nurse or school clinic personnel covers these needs. The district registered nurses are required to train school clinic personnel, backup clinic personnel, as well as the contracted nurses. Currently, the training is composed as an online Canvas course and in-person demonstration. Our district registered nurses assist schools in ensuring that student vaccinations are kept current and provide monitoring assistance. Each district nurse provides support to approximately 30 schools. There are contracted registered nursing agencies in constant contact with our department. The ESE Health Services Department has worked with Human Resources, Safety and Emergency Management, Finance, and federal grants departments to coordinate POs, schedules, determine school needs, and provide any further support. The program specialists and I work together with other OCPS members to maintain open communication with the Department of Education, of Health, and provide support to schools with COVID cases. We meet on a weekly basis with the district emergency team and DOH to discuss cases, CDC guidelines, and what is going well. ESE's Health Services serves as the conduit of information between the DOH and OCPS. Principals in OCPS have the responsibility of entering COVID-19 positive reported cases on a smart sheet for their schools. This information is provided to the DOH on a continual basis. ESE Health Services works with other OCPS departments on the health and safety manual and communication of principals, so information is consistent and understandable when reporting out to schools. The district registered nurses provide medical staff in-person training for medical administration, guidance on what to do if a student is experiencing anaphylaxis, and other diabetes management protocols, seizure protocols, and are resourceful during emergencies. Our 7 district registered nurses support all schools in OCPS, including public, charter, and non-public. They collaborate with medical staff to monitor and create healthcare plans for students who need medical management. The team oversees health clinics throughout the district, visiting and reviewing student logs of medication administration and clinic notes. Our district registered nurses write, on average, 455 individual healthcare action plans for students with varying medical conditions, from allergies, diabetes, and seizures. The health plans include each student's medical doctor's recommendations. Student health plans must be written by a licensed registered nurse working in a registered nurse capacity, or a medical professional with higher credentials. These individual health plans are updated annually. Our district registered nurses also attend IEP meetings when there are individual healthcare plans involved.
Thank you, Sylvia. Now we will move on to some sections for the special programs and procedures. There are times in which students may be in crisis, and it may be necessary to support the student by using various de-escalation techniques. At times, the crisis may escalate to a point where the student may harm others or themselves. If staff is unable to de-escalate the student and the situation, it may be necessary to intervene and support a student in crisis with the use of the last resort technique of restraining. Currently, OCPS has adopted 2 crisis intervention techniques that use digressive strategies: crisis prevention intervention and professional crisis management, PCM. Crisis prevention intervention is our most widely used strategy district-wide and does not use prone restraint. Professional crisis management is only used to support students with high-intensity behaviors and is only used at our intensive behavior units, separate day schools, and contracted sites. Only staff that work with these students are allowed to receive this training and utilize this technique. For our next steps, in an effort to reduce the number of restraints, we have been inquiring about crisis techniques that may be more effective in reducing the use of restraint. One of our partners uses a technique that has reduced the number of restraints in their sites. This technique is called safety care. We will be training trainers for OCPS in January of 2021 in this new different technique. It will be piloted in some of our classrooms that serve some students with the most intensive behaviors. The result will be reviewed at the end of the year. If the results are positive, it is our intention on using this technique in order to reduce the number of restraints. One of our next steps is to reduce the number of restraints by training staff on this new procedure. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act of 2004, Section 616, Paragraph D, requires states to make annual determinations on each local education agency's performance in meeting the requirements and purposes of the IDEA grant. At a minimum, states are required to implement a determination process that considers performance on the state performance plan compliance indicators, data integrity, uncorrected noncompliance issues, and relevant state audit findings. Each LEA must be assigned to one of the 4 categories: meets the requirements, needs assistance, needs intervention, or needs substantial intervention. OCPS has met the requirements consistently for the past 5 years. And now we will go to the parent feedback survey results, and Dr. Ann will speak to that.
Good afternoon. My name is Chen An. I serve as a Senior Director in the Research Accountability and Grants Office, led by Dr. Jennifer Sasser. In December, OCPS administered a survey to collect feedback from the parents and guardians of all ESE students enrolled in the 2020-21 school year. This included parents of students with disabilities and gifted students. The purpose of this survey was to find out how OCPS could help ESE students to be more successful. The survey was administered online through Qualtrics and was sent to all ESE parents and guardians who had an email address on file in Skyward. In addition, the survey was announced through a Connect Orange message to parents of ESE students. Parents could also take the survey by accessing the link that was posted on the OCPS website. The surveys contained 3 open-ended questions developed by the ESE department and were available in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Haitian Creole. Responses for the survey questions were anonymous, and any parent-reported student data were used to ensure valid survey responses, such as verifying student was actively enrolled as an ESE student in OCPS. After data cleaning, a total of 3,622 parents and guardians provided valid survey responses. This includes responses submitted in languages other than English, and they were translated into English. If all 3 questions were left blank, the response was removed from the analysis. There were 3 open-ended questions in the survey. What is going well for your child? How can we help your child to be more successful? And what support do you need in order for your child to be more successful? The Research and Evaluation Department worked with an external research partner to conduct analysis of the results. Hangover research used qualitative analysis coding techniques and categorized survey responses to each question by topic and theme. Coding is the process of examining survey responses for categories and systematically marking responses with a code label that represents the text. Categories are then condensed into broader themes. Coding makes it easier to identify any themes that require further investigation. Qualitative analysis of this scale usually takes months to complete. Given the time constraint, Hangover conducted the initial analysis for a random sample of 267 responses and reported findings in a preliminary report. The random sample was drawn for each grade level and race ethnicity group to ensure representation of the overall sample. This stratified random sample procedure is used widely in survey research due to its proven scientific value in accurately predicting responses for the overall sample. A final report will include a review of all responses and should be completed in the next several weeks. For the first question, parents and guardians were asked what was going well. Results for the top codes are listed here. Overall, nearly 1/4 of responses noted that their student was doing well in the learning environment, categorized within student success. Other common topics included online or remote learning with reference to the Launchpad at Home learning platform, support services their child received, and achievement in specific subjects and identified areas where their child had improved during the year. The category of Other is also included to represent additional responses provided. It is important to note that a respondent may provide multiple perspectives within the same response, each aligning with different topics that are used within the analysis. In such cases, the response is coded using multiple topics, each that is relevant to the response. Because of this, the total number of codes identified exceeds the number of responses to the survey, meaning that the sum of the percentage for each question may exceed 100%. The second question asks how OCPS can help their child to be more successful. More than 1/3 of parents and guardians noted that the district needs to improve supports for students' individual learning needs, such as subject-specific support and tutoring. In addition, 1/4 of responses noted the need for improved or additional support services. There were several respondents, approximately 16%, who did not identify any need for improvement. These parents reported that current supports were sufficient or provided an A as a response. The last question asked parents and guardians what support they need in order for their child to be more successful. Nearly 1/3 of respondents noted that the district needs to improve classroom instruction, such as tutoring or more effective virtual instructional strategies. The next largest number of respondents reported a need for specialized supports, including those of students with learning difficulties, IEPs, and mental health needs. A need for improved communication between the school and home was also identified and reported by 12% of parents and guardians. The results will be further analyzed in the next several weeks. Hangover will closely investigate the responses for students with disabilities when completing the analysis. The primary topics that were identified in the random sample analysis will stay largely the same. There may be some differences and additional topics and themes identified when reviewing all results. This final report will also include further description of such topics and themes, including representative and authentic codes from responses that emerged through the review.
We'll now move to parent focus groups. As one of our next steps, we are creating a parent focus group. In October of 2020, learning communities held roundtables with parents of students with disabilities and students identified as gifted. The roundtable served to get parents' input on their experiences with ESE in the district. In November of 2020, schools and learning communities selected parents from their area to be a part of a district parent group. These parents were then invited by the district in December of 2020 to join the group and attend a meeting being held in January of 2021. Selected parents have been invited to the district to join the district parent focus group meeting on January 27th and will then collaborate with the ESE department to extrapolate survey results as a group. At the end of February 2021, learning communities will invite their parents of students with disabilities to include district focus group parents to fact find from the survey results. Each learning community will then send that information to the ESE department. The ESE department will compile the topics and meet with the district group. The district ESE parent focus group will then meet in March to provide ideas for the topics to be targeted throughout the school year. In April 2021, the district parent focus group will meet with the ESE team department to discuss implementation and next steps as we go. Academic achievement of students with disabilities. For the state of Florida in 2018-2019, represented by the green bar graph on the left, 22% of students with disabilities scored at or above level 3 on ELA state standardized assessments, and 60% of students without disabilities scored at or above level 3. This yielded a 38% point gap between the groups. Whereas for OCPS in 2018-19, represented by the blue bar graph on the right, 17% of the students with disabilities scored at or above level 3 on ELA state standardized assessments, and 50% of the students without disabilities scored at or above level 3. This yielded a 40% point gap between the groups. For the state in Florida, 2018-19, 29% of students with disabilities scored at or above level 3 on mathematics state standardized assessments, FSA Mathematics, FSA Algebra 1 EOC, and FSA Geometry EOC. And 62% of the students without disabilities scored at or above level 3. This yielded a 33% gap between the groups. Whereas for OCPS in 18-19, 22% of the students with disabilities scored at or above level 3 on mathematics state standardized assessments, and 58% of students without disabilities scored at a level at or above level 3. This yielded a 36% point gap between the groups. For the state of Florida, 18-19, 25% of students with disabilities scored at or above level 3 on science state standardized assessments, statewide science and NGSSS biology EOC. And 60% of the students without disabilities scored at or above level 3. This yielded a 35% gap between the groups. Whereas for OCPS in 18-19, 22% of the students with disabilities scored at or above level 3 on science state standard assessments, and 60% of the students without disabilities scored at or above level 3. This yielded a 38% point gap between the groups. For the state of Florida, 18-19, 41% of the students with disabilities scored at or above level 3 on social studies state standardized assessment, NGSSS Civics EOC, and NGSSS US History EOC. And 74% of students without disabilities scored at or above level 3. This yielded a 33% gap between the groups. Whereas for OCPS 18-19, 38% of the students with disabilities scored at or above level 3 on social studies state standardized assessments, and 70% of the students without disabilities scored at or above level 3. This yielded a 32% point gap between groups. Florida federal graduation rate. The overall graduation rate in 2019-20 for the state of Florida is 90%. The graduation rate for OCPS is 90.4. The graduation rate for students with disabilities in OCPS has increased from 67.1% in 2016 to 80.4% in 2019-20. This is an increase of 13.3 percentage points. The graduation rate for students with disabilities in the state of Florida has increased from 66% in 2016 to 82.6% in 2019-20. This is an increase of 16.6 percentage points. ESSA limits the percentage of students that a state education agency may assess with the alternative assessment based on alternative academic achievement standards to no more than 1% of all assessed students in the grades assessed in the SEA for each subject. While there is a limit to the percentage of students statewide who may take the alternative assessment, there is no such limit among local education agencies. Currently, there is no district in the state of Florida that meets the 1% cap. Please note that OCPS has the lowest number of students participating in FSAA when it's compared to other very large districts. And this slide represents a distribution of letter grades for the ESE subgroups across the state of Florida. OCPS is represented with the 37D letter grades statewide. This past year, as we move towards greater accountability and ESSA, FDOE issued the letter grades for subgroups. As we work towards a model of continuous improvement, our ESE department will continue to research best practices, work collaboratively with other districts, our parents and community stakeholders, and strive to make OCPS the best place for all students. Thank you. Now back to our superintendent for comments and school board questions and discussions.
Thank you, Dr. Gesundheit. Just a couple of comments. Let me ask it occurred to Dr. Vasquez and myself that the teacher roundtable summary slide was inadvertently left out. Let me ask Dr. Vasquez just to mention what we learned from our teacher ESE roundtables as well before I make my comments.
Thank you, Superintendent. In October, November, our area superintendents conducted teacher roundtables for those teachers who instruct students with disabilities. And we asked the same 3 questions: what's going well, what keeps you up at night, and what is it that you need to be successful? Amongst the responses given by the teachers to what was going well, they were seeing growth in some of the students that they were instructing. They were happy with the support that they were receiving from families and parents. They also pointed to safety measures that have been put in place at the school
Dr.
level.
Vasquez,
Yes,
can you speak just a little bit louder?
certainly. Is this
Thank
better?
you. Much better, thank you.
They also spoke to the various resources available to them for both face-to-face instruction and launch ed students. What is it that keeps you up at night? Hybrid classes, being able to address the needs of all of the students, addressing parent concerns, especially related to those students who are learning from home, the amount of time that they have to plan and deliver instruction. Some pointed to some of the concerns with students on access points, attendance. Some students are not attending regularly. The evaluations and testing of students was also an area that they mentioned. And lastly, what is it that you need to be successful? They would want more communication at the school level. They are in need of additional behavioral support for some of the students who are at home. They've requested additional resources and lessons through our curriculum resource materials, asked for more trainings related to teaching through distance learning, assistance with modifying schedule. Some of the teachers felt that a full day was a lot for some of the more involved students to be able to participate. And lastly, the idea of how evaluations were going to take place.
Thank you, Dr. Vasquez. So, few additional remarks, and then certainly any additional questions from the board, and hear your discussion regarding next steps and how we move forward. Thanks to Dr. Vasquez and Dr. Schuler, Dr. Gesundheit, the entire team for your work in getting all of this pulled together. It is vast. I think it's healthy for the board and for the community, for all of our parents, not just ESE parents, to hear all of the details around our exceptional student education programs. I also think it informs us for our continuous improvement. We are by no means assuming that we are at a level that we wish to be at. We want to continually improve, but it's also an opportunity to debunk any rumors and any misinformation that may be out there circling around. And so it's a good investment of our time. And I say room to grow specifically because we want to move into the category with the other C districts. There are no districts with an A or a B for their ESSA grades for ESE subgroups, but we certainly want to move into the group of those who are graded C. That is only recently, the last couple of years, that we've had that separation of ESE for grading of subgroups. So we certainly want to reach that level. And I want to stress again something Dr. Gesundheit said early on. So our goal is student success. And we acknowledge that success looks different for different students. And so the right description, almost the legal description, is that we want to help children reach their intellectual ability. We need to help every child reach their intellectual ability. Room for growth and continuous improvement, particularly around classroom instruction and additional supports. That came up both from our ESE teachers and from our parents. Classroom instruction and additional support. for our students. Want to mention, just a reminder, it's been so long ago, about slide 11, that actually delineates what we expend. So if there's a requirement to spend at least 90%, the district actually spends more than the 90%. And that was on slide 11, between 156 and 164% of dollars that are available. There are cost reports. The Auditor General does extensive review. The FEFP every other year actually does extensive review. We've had no significant findings. So I want to stress all of those reports we will make available for review for anyone that is interested, and certainly to board members as well. Slide 52 reminds us that as we go through our LEA determination, for the last 5 years, we are in the category meets requirements. So pleased about that as well. Handover Research, I want to stress, is an external source looking at our surveys, doing surveys where parents actually give input as opposed to checking A, B, C, D, is a much more extensive yet scientific method of gathering input. And so their scientific means is what we have to rely on when we've got thousands of ESE parents that we're trying to gather information from. Their random sampling gives you, and they tell us the random sampling is going to match your final outcomes, but it gives you an idea of areas where we need significant improvement based on that input. We'll have additional review of the funding provided to the board through any means that you require. I know a couple of board members spoke to me about possibility of additional reassurances for the financial expenditures. Happy to do that. At the end of the day, our goal is going to continue to be to help every child reach their intellectual ability. And with that goal in mind, happy to answer any additional questions that you might have and hear your discussion, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. Okay, and let me, I'm going to open it up to comments from board members or questions, but I do want to just take a minute to commend all the staff that's taken part in preparing and presenting this material. Let's begin with Vice Chair Gold.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you again to the staff. I'm in full support of doing any kind of an internal audit and also looking at understanding a little bit more clearly on the numbers. And my first comment / question may come as we take a deeper dive into just understanding that budgetary allocation. But on slide 11, you were talking about the dollars above the baseline of a 90% that's invested into these programs. Where do those dollars come from? Is that grants that we get like to the 164%, or are those dollars that we reallocate from our general budget? I know about 3 years ago, we made some really strong investments with more social services, even beyond what the state was doing. So I'd like to understand that, and what's that added value component there?
All right, we have Mr. Jean-Baptiste at the podium, or at the mic. Thank you, sir. And that is a very short mic for you.
You might need to pull it up.
I'm good.
Okay.
You're a good sport. Somebody please pull that mic up for him.
So to answer your question about where those percentages on slide 11, the DOE provides in the FEFP, we get a base student allocation. That's our revenue source. The additional revenue comes from the additional funding that we receive based on the additional weights and the factors for those ESC FTE programs that we discussed, as well as the categorical dollars that we receive. So the instructional material dollars, the ESC guarantee dollars, and finally, the additional dollars that we receive due to class size reduction. So all of that part of our overall FEFP package, but the adjusted revenue is, their starting point is the base student allocation, and those additional dollars come in to allow us to exceed the 90%.
Okay, follow up to that then. All of those dollars you just described are restricted to this population. They could not be used in other categorical areas or for other purposes. Is that correct?
No, those dollars are available to the entire population.
Okay, great. Thank you. We heard a lot in the surveys and even in the context of your presentation about the support for individual learning. And I've had several conversations with, parents and a couple with teachers. And there's a lot of resource material. But it seems that, and you've already identified this as one of the things that we need to do better, especially in this multiple blended learning environment that we're living in. But how do we make sure parents are aware of those resources? And I'll take iReady, for example. I was talking to a parent this morning who was directed to use iReady even though her son didn't do well on it, and was directed again to use iReady and then to work on it at home. She never got to those other tools. So how do we make sure that across the district that they're aware of the tools, and that also the parents are aware of the tools, the teachers and the parents, and then if they're running into a roadblock like that where they're not getting another tool and they know the one that they're using is just not working for their child, where do they go?
Usually, if we look at the flow chart, if a parent ever has a specific issue with a program, supplemental resources or anything, the first step would be to go to the teacher and the staffing coordinator and say, I need to have a meeting. And at that meeting, it is to address specifically that. This isn't working for me. This supplemental material really does not provide me the or provide us the information we really need. Or iReady isn't really giving us the information or background or a true picture of how my child is doing. And at that point, the team who knows a student better would then work on trying to figure out, is there an alternative, way to do this? Do we have other methods to be able to do this?
So I get that, but they got a roadblock at the school they were at, right? They never got past that. They were told that was the only tool, or that's what they heard. Whether that's what they were told, who knows? But that's what they heard. So how do they get to that next? Where do they go if they feel like they're not getting a resolution after that? Because this went on for an entire year, where they were trying to do interventions. So I think that's important. And I know you'll have to put me back on because I have a few more. But in follow-up to this, if I may just finish my thought, I was looking on the OCPS pages for the resource materials, and I would think they would be under parent resources. Well, they're not. They're under the department and then ESE. So we just need a link under parent resources to get there. Because if I'm new to, when you're in that community, I'm sure you know, but if you're new to the community, you wouldn't, it took me a while to find it.
We could definitely do that.
All right, thank you.
Okay, we'll come back to you, Vice Chair. Let's go to Member Gallo.
Madam Chair. I have quite a few questions, and I do want to thank the team because this was a lot of work, and not just in this presentation, but what we've been working all along. So I really appreciate everybody's help and support as we kind of navigate through this territory. I like Member Gould said I would also support an investigation to the budgets, especially at the school level, and a better understanding of how those dollars are spent at the local level. I do have some questions, and I'm going to have to go back in the queue because I have too many for just my 5 minutes. But so I want to start with restraints. And in looking at the numbers, the restraints that we do are behavioral. Children with behavioral disorders is around 5%. Our children with autism has a much higher number for restraints. Can you explain that and why that is? And what is our plan to reduce those numbers? I know that you heard that we're looking into, I think it was called safety cares?
Yes.
Will that be used for autism kids? So
Yes.
if you could just explain that to me a little bit, please.
Sure. So we really don't look at the label per se. We would look at the behavior. So in that sense, the goal would be to reduce the number of restraints across the board. So when we were looking at, for example, safety care, one of our partners that we work with had reduced their numbers by over 50% using safety care. So then our behavior analysts got together, we've been looking at different, we've also looked at Ukuru, which is a Japanese type style. So we've been looking at it, and this one seemed to be fiscally possible. And
Do we have any understanding of why our children with autism are restrained a much higher percentage than other students with disabilities?
you would have to look at them individually. Usually the way it goes is it depends on the intense behavior, what type of behavior they're displaying. So if for example, students may like to have STEM behaviors. So part of their way of releasing stress would be maybe biting themselves. So if they bite themselves, you can't allow it to keep on going, because then, you know, it'll callus or go in, or you will dig in deep and possibly cut pieces of flesh. So in that sense, you would have to go ahead and restrain it to a point, because that.
So-
Go ahead.
I guess maybe I'm not asking my question quickly. So I guess I'm concerned when I look at these numbers. When I look at
Sure.
70-something percent, 77% of our autistic children are being restrained versus the other student with disabilities. I would think that we would have a reason for that. I mean, what's the percentage of our autism kids to all children with disabilities? Is there a proportionate share in that percent? It just seems like a very high percentage, and I'm trying to understand why it's so high with our kids with autism, and what should we be doing better to reduce that percentage of restraints?
I'll give you one example. One example would be communication. You know, children with autism usually tend to have a difficult time communicating what frustrates them, what hurts, any type of feeling, and that's why we use different types of communications. For example, we use PECs, where it's pictures that the students can tell us what they feel or how they're feeling or why they're upset. So in a sense, children with autism have a real difficult time communicating. So they would have a real difficult time telling you, hey, you know what, I have a toothache and it is killing me. And because I have a toothache, I just want to throw the table off, or I want to slap someone, and I want to just bang my head on the wall. And at that point, that's where it becomes difficult, because we have to work on a way to communicate with students with autism. And it is a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, you're going to see those type of, because they can't tell you. I've had students where the toothache was a perfect example.
Right,
He
they
had a
can't
very
communicate.
deep rotting tooth, and he couldn't tell anybody. He couldn't tell his mom. And he kept on coming to school, and we kept on thinking, why is it?
Would
You know,
would that be an instance, because they do have a more difficult time communicating, would that be like a perfect instance of where a behavioral analysis would be beneficial, where we should be helping that child with their behavior, with better communication, with communicating how they feel? Would that be a behavioral modification? Would that be should we have more supports behind behavioral modification, I guess is what I'm asking,
Right,
to
well-
reduce the restraints to help the communication?
Sure. The behavior analysts in those sites where there is a lot of behavior and restraints, that's what the behavior analysts are there for. So there is a pretty large presence in regards to behavior analysts. But again, it all depends on what it's because if it's something physical, you really wouldn't write a behavior program for that. You would actually want to take them to a dentist or somewhere but you have to figure out that's what it is. So if it isn't that, and then let's say it's because of frustration, then that would be a good reason why a behavior analyst would come in and say, okay, so why are they biting their arm? Well, you know what? It's because they get frustrated. So once they look at, it's frustration, they do what's called an alternative way to communicate that I'm frustrated, to train them to say, you know what? Anytime that you raise your hand, at that point, that tells us, go ahead and give you a break from the activity instead of biting yourselves. So you start reinforcing the hand raising as opposed to the hand biting. So that's when you would write a program with that. But you first would have to determine, why is it happening? You know, what's the purpose of it and the function of it?
Okay, thank you. I'll
Yeah,
come back.
I'd also like to add that the type of restraints that Dr. Gesundheit is referring to would be a restraint when a student is a threat to harm themselves or others. And we see these types of restraints occurring at our most restrictive sites. So you will not see this type of proning in some of our gen ed sites. You definitely see in some of the most restrictive settings. Again, it only occurs when a student is a threat to harm themselves or to harm others. And I think that's important to know.
And just one follow-up question for clarification. So when we highlighted the 70% of autistic kids that are restrained, not all of those are prone restraints, correct?
Right, correct.
That
Okay,
is
I just want to
correct.
make it clarification. I don't want the
No.
public to think that
Correct.
No, that is
prone
correct.
restraining all their students. Thank
Correct. And
That
I
is
think it's
correct.
important to also note that at times you'll have a student who has a high frequency. So let's say if they're starting to bite their arm and they're doing it at a high frequency. Well, at the beginning, you may have 30 restraints a day to put your hand down to make sure you don't bite yourself. And that's the beginning. So you'll notice that on the data, you'll have a student that has quite a few, and it kind of skews the information. But the reality is that it's because they're initiating the process to stop that from happening. And the goal is to reduce it as far down as possible. And that's one of the things that impressed us about what the other company was doing for us, was that they've been able to reduce those behaviors significantly. And if I'm not wrong, I believe even some of the children have 0 restraints at this point. So it sounds really good.
Thank you. Okay, let's go to Member Byrd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, thank you to the staff. This presentation was wonderful. Also, our individual meetings with staff was great. Thank you for taking that time to do that with us. I have a few questions too, so I'll probably have to be put back on. I think I want to start with, at some point in the presentation, you mentioned compliance for principals in the schools, and that's kind of what I wanted to get a little more clarification on. What, who does that, or what is the process for having compliance within the schools for those principals?
For policies and procedures?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
Danielle, would you mind answering?
Come on, Danielle.
Sure, we have our district staffing specialists schedule recurring visits to schools. And during those visits, they give feedback on compliance items, which include FTE, meetings that have been held at the school, any corrections that are needed. It's a checks and balances system. At the end of each month, the principals receive a compliance report that gives items outlined as far as their compliance indicators, including things that they need to be in compliance with as far as outstanding meetings, reevaluations, evaluations, discipline. It gives them basically a snapshot of compliance for the month of their school, and it gives them any actionable things that they may need to do to ensure compliance at their school.
Okay. And then as far as in the classrooms, you said evaluation. So the principals, basically the principals are in charge of evaluating the ESC classrooms in their school, correct? Does anybody outside of the school come in, and like anyone from the ESC department come in and just go into those ESC classrooms and kind of sit and observe, or is it just principals that do evaluations in those classrooms?
Absolutely. We also have program specialists that are assigned to each learning community and as part of STO. And they actually support the school with many different things, including ensuring the provision of services and providing guidance on service delivery. So sometimes principals will contact us and they will ask for us or to have the program specialists go in, and sometimes they'll give feedback on individual students and overall service delivery and how we can always improve what we're doing.
Okay, good. You know, and I think we talked about this at my individual meeting, you know, the concern for providing support for our principals when they move to a new school and they've got a new population, or they've got a ASD cluster that they've never had to support those students before in that way. So I think that's really important, making sure that we're providing them the training that they need so that they know what their units need and what their students need at their school. So that's good, because I also agree with Member Gould that I think that and I mentioned this to you as well in our meeting, I think there's like there's a breakdown somewhere between the district and what happens sometimes in the classrooms. You know, we think all of this is happening, but then sometimes daily in and out, the programs, we have all these vast programs, but they're not all being provided in each classroom, or, you know, for the kids. So just making sure that everything that can be provided in those classrooms is being done. And I think that, as you've said, those are school-based decisions, and the ESC district staff is more of a support. So just figuring out ways, I think, to make sure that those things are happening at the school level the way they should be, I think is really important.
The interesting part was when I came to this position, one of the experiences I had was, as a principal, was at Lon Childs. I had worked years for emotionally behavior disordered children, also at Azalea Park. as a principal. When I went to John Young, it was the first time I worked with not students with challenging behaviors, but children with autism. And I felt lost as a principal in that sense because I had never worked with children with autism. And I thought, what do I need to do? So I took it upon myself to kind of go out there and kind of figure out what coursework do I need to take? You know, what can I provide my staff to do? What does a classroom look like? For, you know, an exceptional classroom for students with autism look like? So I went out and did it upon myself to kind of find that. And it took me some time, but that was very important. So when I came to this position, I got to tell you, that was one of my things. We have a principal institute that we've done for the past 3 years, where we offer that to principals where they could come in the summer and we will tailor the themes regarding ESE where they can come and get informed about that. We also have a principal toolkit now that is online where principals can go and access, and it has information. The goal was, from my experience, if I go into a cluster site of students with intellectual disabilities, how do I find out what the need, what the classroom looks like, how can I get resources? It's in the toolkit. If you're looking for autism, it's in the toolkit. So it's all based on the fact of trying to make sure that our administrators have the background or can reach out and get the background for them to be successful and to make sure that our students get the best education possible.
Good,
And
thank you.
yes, Board Member Byrd, I'd like to add, if I could do so, please. The principals and the assistant principals are responsible for evaluating their staff on campus, including the ESE teachers. The itinerant staff that was mentioned earlier under supplemental services, such as your deaf and hard of hearing, your speech and language, those are staff members that are evaluated by the central office. So I just wanted to make that clear. Our program specialists can support the principals and assistant principals in conducting coaching observations, but they are not evaluating teachers.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. And I'll just get back on the
Okay,
list.
thank you. Let's go to Member Castor-Dental.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate that overview. It was so thorough. There's so many different departments within the ESE division. So thank you for all the work that went into that. I have more of a question about the money that's coming in and the sources of that money. Is it possible to tell us more information about where what the federal dollars are versus the state dollars for ESE students, and what those dollars are, how much it is, how much we're dedicating to the ESE students?
Mr. Kelly is coming forward.
Hello,
We really
Hello.
need to raise that mic, right? Let's just pause for a moment here and raise the mic. Thank you. Unless I'm out there speaking, we don't need it that low. I'm the only person in the room that's short.
all right, is this on?
You're
All right.
on.
When we went over the dollars, we were strictly talking about general fund dollars that were part of the budget when we were showing percentages, like 161%. When you talk, there are additional grant dollars that are separate from that, like IDEA that comes into the district, and those provide supplemental help for this particular population of students. So that is a separate pot of money that comes that was not part of those dollars that we talked about how those dollars in our budgets go to the school. That was talking about general fund dollars, and that was part of the FEFP and our local dollars.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. And Member Castor-Dental, we can certainly get a report to board members just so you're clear on that, on the federal dollars that are provided as well.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That's it.
All right, thank you. Member Gould. Vice Chair Gould.
Thank you. I don't think you can answer this today, but if you could just get this to me, I'm curious. Out of the 10K, or about the 5% of our student populations that have 504 plans, how do we compare to other large urban districts, especially in the state and then the country? I'd like to know that. We have a lot of screening that we have to do, our gifted screening, the state screenings, the health assessment screenings throughout the year. I've always struggled with this. We have an enormous amount of staff, really, but many of them are bogged down with the mandates and the requirements. How much and how do we free up more staff to be more reactive and responsive? And that's a budget challenge. I know it is. I know it's a budget challenge, but are there partners we can bring to this? Are there ways to provide that? Because there's no way you can be screening the number of just gifted students that our psychologists have to do and our social workers have to do and be responding to those questions, and it's no wonder they feel burned out. I mean, you know, because you feel responsible for every single child, but you got to get these done in a time frame. So I think that's part of this ongoing discussion, and you know, this is going to be a difficult budget year, but this issue does not go away with budget cycles. This has been an issue since I've been on the board, and how do we look at this a little differently? I know we've discussed the Medicaid funding before. When I came on board, I had identified that as a revenue stream, and we hopped onto that and got that funding, which was fantastic. But are there ways to maximize that funding? And I know you're using an outside vendor, but sometimes they need a check too. And certainly there may be opportunities coming up with direct federal dollars where we don't have to go through the state. So if there's a way to increase the nurses that if we have RNs, they can do more interventive even with this population. And maybe look at like the Winter Park Health model that we have in partnership with them. And how do we provide even more support services through these kinds of partnerships? How do we duplicate the Special Hearts Farms? And none of these you can answer today, by the way. How do we duplicate the Special Hearts Farm model? Not just that program, which I know the east side of town would like, because I hear it from Bobby Beagles all the time. But you know, other partners. Can we talk to United Arts? Can we talk with United Way? Can we talk with Central Florida Foundation? We have a ton of entrepreneurial businesses that are coming online now because the market's going to force that for people to make a living. How do we plug into that and give these students a lifelong career and make them productive parts of society? That model has been wonderful, and it has insulated those kids a little bit more because they've been able to be at that location because it's outdoors a lot, and not everything is outdoors, but sometimes if we work with partners, there's situations where we can use those spaces because their spaces have been empty and they're large. You know, Plaza Theater came to mind. You know, if we had had an arts program partnership with our students and people transitioning then right into the workforce, that could have been a location that work had been done. So I just think we need to start looking at this from different angles and leveraging every single partner we possibly can on not only behalf of this population, but every student that we have. And the third thing is, and we heard this at last week's board meeting, was a week ago, right? Yes. The ancillary supplies that are not really covered in our budget, like diapers, and I know we had an offline conversation, but let's partner with our own foundation and other Rotaries, Kiwanis, things like diapers, things like those supplies that we need on hand, our PTAs, our angel funds, they can help with that. So, you know, any way that we can help spread the word, we hear all of us up here and on the phone talk to those groups all the time. That's a great resource. And if you give us a menu, we can pass it on and help with that communication. Those were my things, and I'll look forward to the rest of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. My question, I want to follow up on this issue of the requirement of using 90% of our ESC dollars and the reality that we're using well over 150%. So I don't know if that's Mr. Sean Baptiste or if that's our our CFO, whoever wants to answer it, but there seems to be such a disparity, and I want to make sure I'm understanding this. My understanding is that there are ESC dollars, our ESC students, by nature of being ESC students, are bringing in more dollars than your gen ed student, and that we're required to use at least 90% of those dollars for ESC students. Have I got that right?
That's correct. When you
Okay.
take that base student allocation and you have those various weights, and those ESC weights are higher than your general ed population weights, and it varies depending on the grade, et cetera. You saw the
But
chart.
that higher weight,
But that
we're
higher
supposed to
weight,
use 90% of that.
90%,
Okay.
yes.
Not 90%. I just want to make sure nobody was confused that it's 90% of the average. It's 90% of that weighted amount. And
Correct.
instead of that, we're actually using 150+%, which means that our regular ed dollars are, there's actually, if somebody were wanting to complain about this based on that statistic, it would be our gen ed students who are saying some of my dollars are going to ESC students, potentially.
They could potentially.
Okay, they could potentially. I'm not saying they should, and I'm not saying they are, but so that's what that statistic tells us. Now, and that's backed up by the Auditor General's audit and the FEFP audit that's done. Is that right?
Correct. Every
Okay.
year, we have to do the annual filing of our annual financial report. Part of that is our cost report, which provides the expenditures by the various program level, and they review that. When the Auditor General's in-house, they take a look at that even in more detail when
Okay.
they're here with us.
So all that sounds good, but being a skeptic for a minute and trying to put myself in the shoes of ESC parents and teachers, and I think it's important to note that it's not just parents imagining this, it's teachers. And I don't know if it's 10 or 12 or 20 or 100, but I know some teachers are saying that that's not what's happening. So it is possible to do a financial audit and see one thing, but some of the accusations are that some principals are using ESC paraprofessionals when they need a substitute. And they're pulling them out of the classroom that they're assisting in, and they're putting them in as a substitute. Now, I don't know if that happens. I don't know if it happens once in a while. I don't know if it happens frequently. I don't know if it happens in one school or if it might happen in more, but that might not show up in a review of the audit. Is that a possibility that we would miss that?
That would be correct if you had, let's say, a paraprofessional in your example, and they were to be working with your ESC population. They would be coded appropriately to that particular function, and it would show up in our cost report as utilized for that purpose.
Okay. So it would look like they were serving the purpose, but in fact, a principal could use that paraprofessional in a different manner. And it seems like to me that would be something that we would be able to ascertain if we look at how teachers are allocated in the schools. That might be a place, as we hear parents talk about and about the need for an independent audit. Well, there is an independent audit done, but that's an area I've heard over and over again, and I would think that that would be a fairly straightforward thing that we would have data. We have to be careful when we try to audit something that we actually have data that can audit it. But that would be something that if we do have areas, particular principals who are not in sync with the board and the administration, the superintendent's intent for how these funds and the compliance requirement, that we would be able to find that. So that's an area that I would think and I want to be clear for the public, our auditor works for the board. Only the board, does not work, and in no disrespect to the superintendent, doesn't work for the superintendent, works for this board. And in that sense, she is actually an independent auditor, as opposed to a comptroller and auditor that works for the administration. I would think that her team and the auditor she has at her disposal could look at something like that. And we might find, since I see teachers saying this, and teachers should know, but I don't have hundreds of teachers, I have a handful. That would be an area I would really like to see us take a look at. A couple of other things, and you know what, I'm out of time in 20 seconds, so I'll yield my 19 seconds and I'll come back on. Let's go to Member Gallo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I was looking, the behavior specialists are instructional support and staff. On page 18, it says we have to share those services with private school students as well. We have 7 behavior analysis, 16 behavior coach, 12 program assistants, and we have to share them across the district with charter schools and with private schools for services. Okay, and then Miami-Dade has none. I'm not certain how Miami-Dade has none when I feel like that group has to be extremely overworked here in Orange County.
So anything that we would offer to our public schools, we have to offer to charter and private. So if a private school or a charter school were to say, I have a student that we're concerned about and we would like a functional behavior assessment done, we would have to provide someone to go out there and do that for them. So yes, we would.
All right, thank you. I was trying to highlight how overworked this poor staff is. And then I was looking at page 27, and I understand the district purchased curriculum resources. So I just want to make sure I understand this because I believe this question came up quite a few times in phone calls and at the last board meeting. You know, we talk about iReady, Systems 44, Reading Plus, Reading A through Z, Imagine Learning, Teach Town, Early Reading Skills Builder, Teach into Standards. That is available at every single school in Orange County. The district purchases those curriculum and shares them. Is that correct?
We can, but also schools have the ability to purchase that as well.
Okay, because on page 27, the way that it's divvied up, it looks like district purchases, central office purchases resources for schools, and it lists those. So I'm interpreting this to mean that those services that I read is what we purchase that all schools should have access to.
Right, but for example, for reading A to Z, there's other components to it.
Okay, so we just offer the basic, and then they can
Correct.
supplement at the school-based.
Yes.
Do we keep record of which schools have which programs for their students? Is that something we keep
Not
track
as
of?
a department, no, we don't.
Not as a department. So some schools could have access to certain curriculum or school-based curriculum that other schools would not have access
Correct.
to.
Correct.
So there's not a consistency across the district.
There's a menu of programs that they can use.
So that might be another thing to look at when we're doing an audit. That wouldn't be in a financial audit, but might be in an audit of each school so that we can audit the schools to see what programs they offer, what they're utilizing, what are the outcomes of their utilizing, and are they benefiting ESE students? Because then we can develop kind of like a best practices that we can implement across the district.
And that partially was the intention when we did the reading mastery and corrective reading, was to kind of see if that's a program that would, provide some better support or a supplemental for our students to learn how to read.
Mm-hmm. And I understand the need for things to be school-based because each of our schools are different and we need to offer differentiated instruction. But I think part of the issue, not only with communicating with our ESC parents, is that they do talk amongst each other. And so what's at one school is not at their school, and then they want to know why it's not at their school and why it's at this school. And so if we could just, maybe through that internal audit, we could have a better picture of what's happening across the district.
And I wanted to add that they all have access to these supplemental interventions or supplemental materials, but that is very much site-based decision based on the population of the students that they serve. Every school is different and may need to utilize different resources, but we certainly can survey the schools and take a look at which resources are out there. And we also purchase core curriculum at the central office level for all of our schools. So I thought that was important to note. In terms of the ESC guarantee dollars, I'd like to go back to that. I want to specifically state that the Florida Department of Education does not mandate that we utilize those dollars for ESE students. OCPS chooses to allocate and mandate that schools use those dollars for a portion of our ESE population. So I just wanted to make note of that.
Can you say that again?
Yes. So with the ESE guarantee funds, the Florida Department of Education does not mandate that those dollars be specifically allocated for ESE students. OCPS, under the direction of Dr. Jenkins and Dr. Vasquez, have mandated that we utilize those dollars for our FTE levels. If you could go back to that slide,
Yeah,
please.
go back to that slide. I'm sorry. I think we all understood that 90% of those funds had to be used for ESE students.
Yeah.
Was that not what that slide
Yeah,
said?
I think it's slide 15. I just wanted to go back to the FTE numbers. That's where I wanted to go.
Yeah,
And Dale
do
could speak
think-
more towards this, not that one. Could you go back, the one that I was referring to, please?
It's slide 11.
So, yes, so when you go back and you can go back one,
I'm sorry,
please.
slide 10. Let's start at
Yeah.
slide 10.
Go back one more, please.
Florida statute.
So when you look at, we allocate a portion, each school has to allocate some of their dollars for their 111s, their 112, and their 113.
Can we go
But
to
the-
slide 10?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, slide 10 says, the Florida statute says each district shall expend at least 90% of the funds generated for exceptional students on the aggregate total of school costs for such programs. So is that not saying that 90% of the dollars we receive for ESC students has to be spent for ESC students in one way or another? Is that not what that says?
Absolutely, and Dale can speak more
Okay.
towards this. I wanted to reference the ESC guarantee dollars because
Okay.
I just wanted you all to know that those dollars do not have to be utilized, the ESC guarantee dollars, for ESC students only. That's a practice that Orange County Public Schools puts into place to serve our ESC students. So we actually go over and beyond what is required by the Florida Department of Education.
I'm so sorry, I'm still confused.
I'll let Dale,
Is
maybe he
anybody
can
else
clear it up.
confused?
Dale?
Okay, I'm sorry.
All right, the dollars, when we talk about the 90%, we're
different-
talking about the
different
base
pots.
student allocation multiplied
different
times the various
different
weights,
pots.
those various program weights. That's how they come up with the 90% at the state level, to say you have to do that. Beyond that, there are additional dollars that come to the district that we fund the beyond amounts for. That's why we're well beyond the 90%. As far as the ESE guarantee, we actually provide an ESE guarantee amount to each of our schools that we locally have restricted and say, you need to spend this on that population, which is your 111, 112, 113 students, not your 254, 255. It's those 111, 112, 113 students. Those go out to your individual schools in their site models. They have to delineate how they're planning to use those dollars. The area superintendents review that to make sure everything's in line with our requirements of the district.
Is everybody clear?
Hopefully that's clear.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
one additional thing
Yeah.
that one of the board member Gould mentioned about Medicaid dollars. We are continuing to trying to maximize the dollars coming to the district for Medicaid. Just so you know, those dollars that we get for Medicaid are in the general fund. Those are not separate grant funds. If y'all happen to recall, when I do the pie charts for the sources coming to the general fund, you know, there's this small little sliver that says federal. It's less than 1%. Well, part of that less than 1% is those Medicaid dollars. I just wanted to make sure that's clear as well. So that's in the general fund.
Okay. Member Gallo, we were on you, right?
We were, but my time's up, so I've already queued back in, so
Okay.
thank you.
Member Byrd?
Thank you. Okay. All right, let me retrack where my thinking was before. Okay, I'm going to kind of change gears just for a minute and go to our inclusion model. I know that, obviously that's the goal. We want to try to have as many kids, ESE kids, as we can, the most least restrictive environment, have them in the classroom. How do we, as a district, how are we encouraging that model? Like, what are we using? Are we, can you kind of explain the different ways that we facilitate inclusion in the district?
So with inclusion, there is a course called Universal Design for Learning, which is kind of talks into how teachers can really prepare their classrooms to receive and educate students regardless of their learning modality. So that's one way. So education has been really strong. One of the areas that we really found, and in fact, I've been working with curriculum and digital learning together to come up with some plans, but we're realizing that not only do we have to educate our special education teachers, but we also have to educate more of our general education teachers to push the inclusion piece. Because the reality is, they play a huge role within the inclusion process. So by pushing more professional development towards them and working towards that, we feel that that would be will play a huge role in regards to increase the inclusionary practices throughout schools. Also, every school should have their BPI, which is the plan in regards to inclusionary best practices. So each school, because they're at different levels, then should kind of plan out regarding, okay, so for the next year, this is what we are going to do as a school to move forward to within the inclusion piece. Give you a good example. So our Thornbrook Elementary School has, you know, really far ahead with their population of students with autism in regards to inclusion in their whole system. So they would have definitely a different plan than a school that may have just started or is trying to include more of their students in there. Another area that we're looking at also is pre-K. Within pre-K, we want to look at how do we start from when they're little to let them access all the general ed pieces and then start determining what are the areas that they need to be more restricted in. So that's a process. I know that we've tried a couple of pilots. I believe in Millennia was one of them, where we had an inclusionary model for pre-K. So that's an area we would like to expand, is try to have more models like that is more geared towards inclusion, so that when they go kindergarten and above, they're already in a setting like that. And so that's another area that we've been also looking at. The differentiation piece is going to be big. One of the things we pushed last year was a person first language. We kind of believe we have to have the same vocabulary district-wide in order to be able to move forward, so that people do understand, you know, people first language, and then take small step towards that. We also work with the Florida Inclusion Network, and the Florida Inclusion Network actually provides training to schools in regards, you know, one of their biggest pushes is scheduling, you know, scheduling around students with first scheduling their students with exceptional, that are students with disabilities, and then trying to do the school around it. And that way it promotes inclusionary movement throughout the school. So those are the biggest projects that we're looking at, but I really think that being able to spread more of that and try to do a partnership, and that's one of the things we're really excited about this year, is the collaboration for curriculum and digital learning, and the multilingual services and ourselves are working together to kind of see where can we blend and weave ourselves together so that we're just one, you know, unit working towards the inclusionary portion.
Thank you so much.
You're
I appreciate that. And, you know, I'm a huge proponent. I feel like anytime that we can have those children included, it's good for everyone. It's good for our general ed students as well.
It is.
My concern, and I expressed this to you in our meeting, of course, is for our classroom teachers, our general ed classroom teachers. It's a lot on them, and when they have multiple students with, you know, IEPs, you know, ESOL students, gifted, 504s, and they have to keep those reports. And we talked about, I've talked to teachers where they have, you know, 10 kids with all those different reports they have to write. It's a lot, and it's overwhelming. So I would really like for us to look at ways we can support them more. Even we talked about the possibility of offering stipends to those teachers that are willing to get the extra training they need to have those students. So,
and that's where the universal design piece comes in big, because that's kind of like the goal of that strategy, is for classrooms to just have everything in place, so no matter what happens, you were ready for them. The prime example was Target. Like, you know, if you look at Target and how there's a ramp at the entrance, that came from universal design, was the fact that if you were if you were disabled or not, you could get in easily into Target. And that's kind of like where the concept came out of, you know, how do we prepare things so it doesn't matter what, you know, your challenges are, it's going to serve you no matter what. And that's where universal design kind of plays in, and we'd like to push that more, so teachers that are in regular education set their classrooms up so that when students come in, guess what? I have all types of modalities, and I'm going to be able to, you know, have something that's going to help you get better and be more successful in it.
thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Member Felder.
Thank you. First of all, good afternoon. I thought you did a very, very good job with your presentation, and you all met with me, and it was so much for me to try to encompass and take in. And a lot of the things I wanted to say, I think a lot of my fellow board members have said some things, but something is still weighing in on my mind. And I'm glad you kind of clarified about the statutory requirement about 90%, because for a long time, I thought that from the Florida Department of Education, they were the ones who decide where the ESC funds were going. And coming fresh out of the classroom, I do know that there have been times when those funds have been utilized for other things because you have school-based management with principals. So my concern as a board member is that perhaps now that Dr. Schul has explained it a bit to us, that I'm so grateful that Orange County School Board and the superintendent decided to really put more emphasis on that. But I guess accountability and integrity has to step up for those persons in leadership. If you have that money for specified ESC students in needs, like they have like a reading program and the computer is going to cost $11,000, and you decide to get $11,000 for new furniture. You know, I'm not saying nobody did that, but I'm just saying integrity steps in. Integrity steps in. You have to make the right decision, and we have to find a way to find out. I don't know anything about paraprofessionals having to come out. I've never experienced that with paraprofessionals, you know, coming out, having to sub. Then we need to get more money to pay for more subs, because that should not happen if they're supposed to be working with the students. And the last thing I wanted to say, I think that with the parent focusing group, that's one thing I want to talk about, because I'm thinking about my district. I'm glad that you have that. I think that needs to be seriously considered, and so that parents will not feel incompetent or they feel like they cannot have input. I think that's so important that they understand exactly what is happening with their child, and that because the child is different, it doesn't mean wrong, just different. I think it's very important that parents understand that. And I'm thinking about my district, and when I saw that this is what you're doing, we need more parental involvement, and maybe they need an education. Maybe they don't even understand ESC. They don't. They just say my child's special, I get a check, whatever. They need to really understand. And I often say this, I'm ESC. You know why? Because I got specialized things going on. We all do. You understand what I'm saying? So I appreciate the effort with the parent focusing group. I'm glad I got some clarity about the statutory requirement, the 90%, because I really thought that came out of DOE. I appreciate that the superintendent said that we're going to specifically take this money and let it work with ESC, and maybe we need to take a letter to Tallahassee. But if it's for ESC, if it's for whoever it's for, let it be for that. Integrity has to be it has to be the thing that motivates us to do the right thing, and accountability. If you're principal, you know you're not doing the money right, you got to do it right, or you got to be dealt with. Okay, I'm just very transparent here. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Member Felder. Let me, I want to piggyback on a point that you made about the role of parental involvement and the education process. One of the things I think is really important is that the district, parents, teachers, all of us are on the same page about what our reality is and what our expectations are. One of the terms, and I don't mean to be critical, I might have misheard you, Dr. Gesundheit, but I thought that you said that students, special ed students, were supposed to be educated in the least restrictive environment possible. And I think that the statutory term is actually appropriate and not possible. But because I think it is always possible to have every student in a gen ed class, but it may be entirely inappropriate. And I think that it's not what people want to hear, but I think we have to speak the truth. And if you put a child who has severe autism, who is prone to hurting himself, is not communicating, is violent in the classroom, putting him in a general education classroom is doing that child, him or her, a tremendous disservice. It is also doing a disservice to the entire classroom. And so I think we have to recognize, we all have to understand that the word is appropriate. And I am a huge advocate. My children grew up when the classrooms were completely segregated. And I grew up where the schools were segregated as far as ESE students. And I've seen an incredible transformation of our culture in our society, this generation, because of inclusionary education. So I am a huge advocate. But I still want to be realistic that there are times when a student cannot be in a general education classroom either all day, or in some cases, they can't be at all because it's just not appropriate for them. So I wanted to say that because I think when we're talking to parents, we have to be honest with our parents. And we have to have appropriate expectations. The other is the issue of what can a parent expect out of their child? We all tell our children they can be anything they want to be when they grow up, okay? Well, when my 3-year-old youngest son came to me and asked me if that was really true, and I told him yes, absolutely. When he came back out a few minutes later and told me he had decided that when he's going to kill me for this, that he wanted to be an elephant when he grew up. Okay? I did not see that coming. So I had to kind of evaluate what I was saying and how that was being taken. Well, the reality is some of our children have disabilities that are going to affect their ultimate capabilities. And our goal, what we're trying to do, we're trying to get them to their highest potential capability, what they are actually capable of doing. And our goal is to make sure, if it's humanly possible, that those children can be independent, self-sufficient, and function in society. But we also have to be truthful that some of our children with severe disabilities may not ever read on grade level. They may not be doing math on grade level. So I know I'm going to get hate mail out of this, and I regret that because this is something I and the rest of the board are extremely passionate about. But I think when we bring our parents in and we want them to be part of this, we have to have honest conversations about what can we do and how can we do the best for our children. If we're not realistic about that, and if we're not meeting our children where they are, not where we wish they would be, but where they are, I think we're doing them a disservice. One other thought that I had in terms of some of the emails I've gotten about concerns that teachers have, I've heard teachers talk about a lot of differences from one school to the next in terms of resources that are available. Some of the emails I've gotten are just not accurate because, for instance, A to Z is available by the district to all schools, but I think that our teachers may not know everything that's available to them, but I also think they know a lot more than we do about maybe inconsistencies in data collection and how we're monitoring things. And if those points are accurate, I think it's a place the district should be looking. And that's not an auditing issue, but that's a best practices issue, as a vice chair would say, and an area for opportunity. And then one other concern, I've been concerned that we have resources and some of our teachers aren't accessing the professional development. Some of the concerns that I've heard back to counter that is that if they have resources that are being pulled for them, if in fact we have a principal that's not valuing what those dollars are supposed to go toward, that maybe they don't have the time to get the professional development because they don't have the support in the classroom they're supposed to have. And if that's happening, that's an area that we absolutely need to address. So I think that if we focus and audit appropriately, I think that meaningful things can come out of this. We can either be reassured things are working well, or with a district our size, we can isolate those areas where they aren't and fix them. So I think that there's great value in taking an introspective look. Let's go to Member Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to, I have feedback, I'm so sorry.
Absolutely.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Member Lopez.
Perfect. I would like to congratulate the ESC department for this great presentation. And to Dr. Schuler, and again, thank you for always responded to my emails and responded to the emails of our ESC parents. I know that all of us are very committed to our ESC students, the school board members, the superintendent, and the district. We always have space to grow. I have a question. I have a few questions. The first question, well, the first comment is that I also agree with the internal audit. And I'm sorry if I asked something that you already responded, but I was having problem with the connection. I'm still having problems. I can hear my voice every single time I talk, so I have a very strong feedback. The first question that I have is the protocol that the district follow in order to find a substitute for an ESC teacher. And the last question is about trainings. Do we have trainings available for other staff members that are not instructional personnel?
Yeah. Yes, she's asking about trainings. Non-instructional for like paraprofessionals. We do.
Yes, we do. For paraprofessionals, we have digital donuts for like 30 minutes of quick training on certain areas. We also do training for verbal digressive techniques for bus monitors, bus drivers, different personnel depending on each school. Some schools, principal would like the entire staff to be trained, and we will do that as well. So those are the different areas that, yes, we do provide training for different positions other than instructional.
And I,
Perfect. And also, with the substitute, what is the protocol to be followed when we have an ESC teacher that's gonna be absent?
The Kelly Services is works with the schools to get substitute teachers for those areas. So if there are ESC teachers or because some teachers do have the ESC background, some of the subs, and they will do that. So it depends on the exceptionality. I don't know personally the fill rate for ESC teachers, but I do know that Kelly Services does cover those absences.
Member Lopez, let me add further. So the process for the protocol for getting substitutes for ESC teachers would be identical to gathering any substitutes. The question that we're going to research that Dr. Vasquez and area superintendents have been looking into is if there is an absence that is unexpected, last minute, and necessary to pull someone to cover it, what is being done? What would you consider before you actually pull a para who is in an ESC classroom? Because ESC classroom paras get substitutes as well. If they are out, they are entitled, those positions are entitled to substitutes as well. And so Dr. Vasquez and area superintendents are looking into that. We hope it's not a common practice. Doesn't mean it never happens. It should only be by exception in emergency cases, but we're getting further information on that.
We also offer professional development training opportunities in the summer where we provide a stipend for teachers. In terms of resources, we make that list available in our deputy superintendent's newsletter that we actually update quite often. We also have this information posted on our web, but we can certainly look at ways to make sure that the resources that are available are communicated to all of our stakeholders. We can certainly continue to look for more ways, but I just wanted to make sure you were aware what we are currently doing in terms of professional development and resources.
Thank you so much.
Anything else, Member Lopez?
That's gonna be all.
All right, thank you.
Chair.
Member Gallo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I meant to, last time I spoke, to echo what Member Gould said. I'd love to have a special Hearts Farm out in Christmas. So Bobby Beagles, if you're listening, let's talk. Because I think that is just a phenomenal place, and they do really good work there. I also agree with Member Gould about where we put stuff on our website for the parent trainings. If we could just link it And I don't know how else we notify parents that those resources are available. I know a lot of parents are extremely busy, especially parents of children with special needs. So if we can get, you know, just as easy as possible, or just alert them more times, you know, through social media, or try to get them on our social media page. They might not even have time to be looking at those avenues. I wanted to talk about the assisted technologies. So how is that determined? Is that determined through a student's IEP? And then once it's determined that assistive technology is needed for that student, who purchase it, who makes sure that it's being utilized correctly and that it's in the classroom? Because I think we heard during the last board meeting that those weren't being purchased along with diapers, and that they were being hand manufactured and not really of good use. So if someone could answer that, and then I have several more questions.
I'm going to have Elizabeth go ahead and answer that.
So when you're looking at assistive technology, you're looking at data-based decisions. So we may have a student who is deaf, and we say, oh, well, we should give them assistive technology. Well, we need to know if that assistive technology is going to help them. So the different types of service providers will go out and work with students and collect data to see what is the best type of equipment that you can use with a student. So we may have trials that we do. We may look at if it's a large screen laptop, it could be a communication device, it could be high tech or low tech. So there is some thoughtful data collection and trials that go on. And then we look at what is going to be the best fit, and then we go to the IEP, we add that, and then we look at how we can provide that type of equipment. Sometimes it's something that is very inexpensive. It could be something like a slant board, which is very, very, very minimal, or it could be something that's very costly, where we would look at other resources to be able to provide the funding for that. But once we find out what's going to be most beneficial for that student, that's when we go ahead and implement it. We put it on the IEP, and we go ahead and make the purchase.
Okay, so it's up to the schools to purchase the material required for those students needing that type of technology.
It depends. So yes, we look at the schools first to see if the schools can make those accommodations and fund those things. So things such as the slant boards or the large screen laptops, those might be things that they can fund, but there are other things that are way outside of that we do look at making purchases through other types of funds.
Okay, thank you. And then I wanted to talk, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit and talk about access points. Do we know how many students currently in Orange County are being taught on access points? I know we know how many take the
1,800.
the FSAA. I'm sorry?
1,800.
So we have 1,800 students that are being taught on access points.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have 1,800 students that take the FSAA? Is there a correlation between access points and the FSAA?
Yes, that's a test that students on access points would take.
So do we have 1,800 students in the district that take the FSAA? Or does not every student on access points take the FSAA?
Is it on? Okay. So we have 1,800 students that take FSAA. FSAA is only grades 3rd grade through 12. Students are not usually formally placed on access points until 3rd grade, because the idea is we expose them to the gen ed curriculum with all the accommodations possible, because we want them to be successful in the gen ed curriculum. So they're not usually formally placed until 3rd grade, when we've exhausted all other avenues, and it is almost like a last resort for the students. So it's very rare to find a student on access points in grades K1 and 2.
Okay, no, I understand, thank you. So would there be an instance, because one of the complaints that we've been hearing from parents is that children are being taught on access points and then being administered the FSA, and they're not given the curriculum or the standards they need to be successful on the FSA. So I'm curious, is there any students that are being taught on the access points that do not take the FSAA?
Can you repeat that for me, just to make sure I have it?
So do we have
Just last night.
any students that are on access points that are on that curriculum that do not take the FSAA that may be taking the FSA or another assessment?
Okay, so to be formally placed on access points, the parent has to agree to it, and it is part of their IEP. Once they are placed on access points, then they automatically take FSAA when it comes to a testing grade.
Okay. Thank you. Because there's been some confusion. One of the complaints we've been hearing is that children are being taught on the access curriculum, and then, like I said, be given the FSA, and it's not conducive for them performing well on that test to be on that curriculum. So I
Right.
wanted just to clarify that.
I'm sorry. So the curriculum that we provide as part of the core to supplement the core for students on access points is unique learning systems. We actually have a system in place where at the beginning of each year we monitor each teacher accounts, because the licenses or the accounts are signed to teachers, to verify that they are still instructing students on access points.
Okay.
That's an easy audit then. And remember, Gallo, that's one of the kind of allegations. While it may be just a small number, it would be so helpful to know what school. You don't have to tell us the student, but they have got to tell us what school they believe that's taking place, because that's not a common practice. We would certainly love to look into that.
Thank you. That's a fair point.
Yeah.
And I
If
don't
a
know that I
teacher
was
does
given-
not have any students on access points, we literally revoke their license until they do.
Okay. Thank you. And then I'll come back in the queue because I do have more questions.
Thank you. I just want to talk about the achievement gap for reading, because, we hear a lot about that our ESC kids are, maybe not given the resources to learn to read like they should. And I know you had a slide up there where you showed that our achievement gap, I think, and compared it to the state. Do you have that there? Is that it? Yeah. So our achievement gap is actually lower than the state's achievement gap. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay.
No, the other way.
Or-
Our gap is larger, 2% larger. Ours is 40, the state's is 38.
Oh, yes, got it. Okay. So I'm just wondering what kind of, and I think you might have covered this when you were talking about the supports. What kind of supports do we have for our reading, for our ESC kids, for reading?
So just to give you some background information, we've attended statewide meetings for learning disabilities. And within that, those conversations, the state had basically what they were looking at was that the majority of or the districts were concentrating more on standards in regards to where they were focusing intervention pieces. The intervention piece to actually teach how to read when you have like a direct instruction explicit for reading was kind of moved to the side by a lot of districts because they were focusing more on the standards. So there's been a huge movement district-wide, statewide, to go more towards, looking at direct instruction and explicit instruction for reading, like reading mastery or corrective reading. That's why we started a pilot last year, and we've expanded more this year to start using the reading mastery and corrective reading within our schools as direct instruction teaching reading. And our goal is to look at the results from that and kind of see if the gap does close and it helps. And to tell you from personal experience from schools that I've used it with and other principals, it's a tremendous program, and it's research-based, and it's been used for years and years and years. So we're hoping to see great results from that. And if that's the case, our goal is to expand that to other schools and work with them in order to be able to provide that to students.
Good.
So if you would go to slide 27, please.
Hope I don't make you dizzy, I'm sorry.
So if you take a look at slide 27, it outlines the numerous resources that we have available, not only for our regular ed or our gen ed students, but our students with disabilities. For example, when you talk about the reading and you look at the critical components of reading, you're looking at reading comprehension, you're looking at phonemic awareness, you're looking at phonics. So SIPS would be a program that can assist with that. That's not only for your gen ed students, but that's for your students with disabilities, depending on where they're at on that pendulum of reading. So it's important to note that it's not just that specific for ESE students. If a student, whether they're ESE or gen ed, and they're having difficulty in the area of that phonics, the phonemic awareness, we would use SIPS. So it's important to know that the resources are aligned to the needs of the students. It's not necessarily based, in many cases, off of if that student is gen ed or if that student is ESE. So I just wanted to make sure I pointed that out to you when you asked about what do we
Yes.
have available for reading.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. And I'd also like to just agree with what the chair said, that I think that an audit of making sure that all of these resources that we have available are actually being used where they say they're being used, or staff is being placed where they say they're being placed. I think that that's really beneficial, because when it comes down to it, there's a lot I mean, look at that, it's a lot, but is it all really accessible to all those classrooms and to the teachers that want it? And maybe their administration is not wanting to spend the extra money or to, get the resources for them. So, yeah, I would agree on that. And one other thing I wanted to mention, I forgot to mention in our meeting, was something that I would like to see us work on is possibly screening more for visual issues, like visual convergence insufficiency. That's a huge issue that I think that is overlooked a lot, and it's a lot more common than we think. It's like 1 in 8 children have these visual problems that are really not recognized. They're often misdiagnosed for other issues, even learning disabilities, and they can be easily corrected. So I would love to see us as a district really checking those young kindergarten, first grade kids that are kind of struggling with the reading, even in our general population, screening them for those visual. And that it's kind of a specialized screener, but it can be done. I know my daughter had it, and we had no idea, and it was caught in a regular eye exam, but it was a good doctor that happened to catch it. But if it's something that she wasn't reading on grade level, and we couldn't figure out why, and she was always complaining about being tired, and her eyes were always tired, and she didn't want to read, and we found out that was why. So, and it's corrected and fine now. So, but I think that that's something that we could do as a district-wide too.
So, Member Byrd, I think that we may have somebody queued up to respond to that.
Yes, so we actually, the vision department, we are now required when we have students that are diagnosed with visual inconvenience, we have to screen them. So we do get involved with all of those cases. And then we make determinations if we need a 504 plan or if they need direct services. So that is every single student that comes with that diagnosis we have to address. Also with looking at accommodations, we're looking at identifying with diagnostics students that have significant reading difficulties and looking at auditory accommodations that need to be made for them. So we're looking at that piece as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, Member Cobert.
Thank you, Chair. So the majority of my questions have been answered, but I'd like to just put out a couple of comments. First of all, Board, I don't know if you know that my daughter went through a reverse inclusion program at OCPS. So the majority of the preschool class were students with disabilities, and then the few mainstream children in there, and it was a wonderful experience. So I have a lot of history and background with the teachers and the programs. I tremendously appreciate that staff's work and the board's willingness to have this extensive conversation, because I think that the element that's been missing really has been communication. I really think that the board and the public can see that we have an incredibly qualified staff that cares greatly, and Dr. Gesundheit, I think you especially are the right person to lead us at this time. But I think there's a lot of communication between the district and the public, the parents, the teachers. I think that what you have put together in this 70-page presentation is a wonderful manual for schools. And I hope that our principals, through your training, and our school communities, whether they're for mainstream students or ESE students, would take the time to watch the presentation or go through this, because I think that you have compiled all of these resources and opportunities in one place that could really help to solve a lot of these problems. And then I also wanted to say that I do support an audit, And I want the public to know that our internal auditors, not every district has an internal auditing department, and they are independent. I want the public to have every confidence. Linda Lindsay and her staff have some of the highest level of integrity of anyone you will ever meet, and they have a great way of sussing out opportunities and efficiencies that we might not have seen so that the district can take corrective action. And I just want to make sure that the public has every confidence in our auditors that they will do a really, really good job in finding some of the things that we've talked about today. And I want to thank you again, Superintendent and Board, for having this extensive conversation.
Thank you, Member Colbert. Member Gallo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I agree with Member Colbert about our auditing team and the hard work of our staff. They work extremely hard for all of our children. So I just want to put something out there, and then I'm going to shift gears really quick because I've got a few questions towards the end of the presentation I haven't been able to get to yet. I know that when we talked in our one-on-one, one of the things that we discussed was our bottom 25%, our student with disabilities, and how involved are they in the reading camps and some of the reading interventions that we put in. So are the ESE students included in the reading camps and the reading interventions in that bottom 25%?
Yes, absolutely. All of our subgroups would be included in the bottom 25% in regards for services in terms of interventions. They should be included. If there's a case or a situation where a child is not included, we encourage the parents to talk with their principal, talk with their teacher, and go to them first as their line of defense.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Schuler. I want to switch gears for a little bit. I want to move down to, first I want to talk about the PCMs. And I think this was an internal document that was given to the board, but it highlights the total PCM certifications of staff that's trained. And in 2019, 2020, it was like 193. And in 2020, 2021, it's 108. Is this due to COVID? I was just curious as to why the number dropped so much on PCM trained staff in Orange County. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Lisa McDonald. I'm a district behavior analyst.
Hi, Lisa.
And I think I can answer that question for you. It's the same kind of situation that we found with CPI. So this is it's a stringent 3-day training, and with not being able to be face-to-face, they had to stop training new participants.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was suspected. I just wanted to verify.
Okay.
Thank you. Then I want to move on to the end of the presentation where we're talking about the gaps in the achievement. I know that Member Byrd brought it up briefly, and that we have some interventions that we're going to be doing, that we're looking at those numbers. But I was just curious really quickly, because in some of the information that we were given in a presentation at a school board meeting, it was a state and district ESE performance data. The numbers, like the 5-year graduation rate for total population and SWD subgroups, we have for 2019 listed at 79.1. And so I was curious how we went from 79.1 to 90%, or if there's like, if that number is indicative of a different area than the 5-year graduation rate. I was just, the differences in those two numbers just confused me.
Thank you. Can somebody answer that question?
Bring
And
it
the
up.
79 that you were referring to came from?
It came from a PowerPoint presentation. It was at a school board meeting. It was a state and district ESE performance data. I mean, I printed this out directly from BoardDocs.
Thank you.
Is that on?
But it does say 5-year graduation rate, so I didn't know if that was the difference. I'm just curious as to why we have two different graduation numbers floating around.
For what year was that?
This was, it said 2019, the state, it says 5-year graduation rate, total population, SWD subgroup, and it says, for the state, it was 80.6, for Orange County, it was 79.1, for Broward, 82.4, and then it lists all of the Dade, Duval, Hillsborough, Palm Beach, and Pinellas. The only one below us was Hillsborough, and this was according to Ed Stats. And then this one says 90%. So and it's a Florida federal graduation rate, so I didn't know if there's a different definition, which would give us a different number.
Go ahead.
So we can certainly have RAG research that, because I'm not quite sure what you're referring to without being able to see that at this time. But when you said a 5-year, are you referring to an average of 5 years? Because this is a yearly rate.
This says 5-year graduation rate, total population. So I'm assuming that it's an average.
Right. So this is not an average. This is by year. So if that's saying 5 years, I can only assume, again, I cannot see that. 5-year would be an average of 5 years. And then we've posted for you the graduation rate each year. We did not do an average on this particular slide.
Member Gallo, can I help?
Yes, please.
So I think Member Gallo's point, though, is that that number couldn't possibly correspond to this if we average up these 5 years, you wouldn't get the 70. So I do think I think staff needs a chance to look at where that data came from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you add up all these, like this chair said, it wouldn't give us.
Not even close.
No.
So there's obviously a difference, but there's no way our staff can figure out that at this point. So
if you could just get back to me on the difference, and it was. And I'll be happy to share this presentation. I mean, it was done by district staff. But it's the same thing with the 5-year grade average for English language arts and in the mathematics, the numbers just aren't correlating. So maybe it's the federal graduate. I'm just trying to determine why the discrepancies, the disparities between those two numbers. So I understand.
If you would forward that information to us, we can work with RAG to research that information and get back to you.
Okay, that would be perfect. I would appreciate that. And then I do have some more questions.
Keep going.
Thank you. And then I wanted to talk about the parent survey and the feedback. When we did the survey, the answers to the survey, did those include both ESE students and students with disabilities? Is it include both in the parents that we surveyed?
So you said both ESE students and students with disabilities?
Well, that was the same. I'm sorry. I meant gifted students and students with disabilities.
Yes, it did include both.
When we get the final results, will there be a breakout so that we can see the difference between gifted and students with disabilities? Because I think that the results will be different from each subgroup.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
And then, so out of the 20, what was the number? Out of the 20,000, well, actually the 31,782 students that we have categorized for ESE, we only had 3,622 responses. Is that a normal response? I would think it would be. That's probably actually a really good response, isn't it? It's like 10%. Yeah.
It is.
Okay. I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you. I thought the same thing. I was surprised it was so low, and then I remembered it's 10%, which is actually generally considered high.
Yeah.
So let's do this. We're going to close in just a minute. I have a couple suggestions for a path forward based on what we've talked about here today. First of all, I think it would be helpful to the board if the board had a copy of the Auditor General and the FEFP reports that have been done, if you could do that for the last 2 years, regarding our ESE cost study. And that's the time when this board, as it exists, with the exception of Member Felder, but she's been a part of the district for so many years, that she would, if we tried to keep up with all the reports you'd have to give her, she'd never come up for air after reading them all. But I think that would give us a baseline of understanding what the state's looking at. And the next step, I think, would be to work with Ms. Lindsay to develop a scope for the audit. What I'm going to ask is if the board would authorize me to work directly with her based on what we've talked about here to develop a scope of the audit, working with the superintendent so that we understand where we have data and what we can achieve. And then we can bring that scope back for the board before we begin so that the board has an understanding of what we're proposing and if there's anything that we're missing. Is everyone reasonably comfortable with that approach?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Perfect. And let me take a minute to close out by just, again, commending. Okay, you have one question? Go ahead. Take your question, and then I'll try to make some.
I have like 2 or 3 more questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Member Gallo. I thought you were done.
I know.
You
not
took
yet.
a breath. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
So, and then I promise I'll be quick.
Of course. No, go ahead.
The advisory council the ESC Advisory Council, I believe we received an email that stated that it was going to start this week. Has there been a first meeting for that? This month, I'm sorry.
Are you talking about that focus group that we're doing?
No, it was in one of the emails that we received, the one that had all the,
That would be the district,
Yes.
the district focus group.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. The 27th, it's scheduled for the 27th.
so the members have been chosen for that?
Yes,
Can we get a list of who's serving on that committee, please?
yes.
And then on the individual focus groups from around the district that we're doing as well, which is awesome. How are they chosen? If someone wants to be on that focus group, can they go to the principal and say, can I participate? I mean, are we kind of opening it up to all by district for those who wish to attend? And Dr.
Yes.
Schuler is saying yes.
Yes, ma'am.
So,
Yes.
so I want to be clear, though, if board members actually attended, then you created a sunshine issue?
No, I'm not looking,
Okay. I
not
thought you-
looking to attend. I just want to make sure that those
You said
parents that
I.
wish to attend can.
You said I thought you meant yourself.
No, sorry.
All right.
No, I just want to make sure that, because I know some parents have come to me that were interested in serving on the one that was in District 1 or just attending those roundtables, and I just want to make sure I was giving them good information that they could.
I'm glad you brought that up, Member Gallo, because we really want that grassroots level keeps us from just focusing on a very narrow group of a particular exceptionality in some instances. It gives every ESE parent at the learning community level an opportunity to stay engaged, and I think that's really critical for something as important as this, so I'm glad you brought that up.
Great. And let me just,
There you go.
I think
It's on the slide.
I am done.
Woohoo! Okay. So let me close by, again, thanking everybody who has presented today, the entire team at the district level. And I want to call out Dr. Schuler because she has been phenomenal since I have been here. I didn't realize that she just moved into the current role she's in at the same time that I took office. So her and Dr. Gesundheit working together. This is a team that is competent, they're capable, they're qualified, but I think most important, they have heart. So just heart without all the rest of that is nice, but doesn't get you there. All the rest of those qualifications, not heart, you're still not going to get there. So I think, Dr. Jenkins, thank you, and I want to commend you as well for putting together a great team. And we can do better, and we have to look hard and look within and critically analyze every aspect of what's happening at our schools, and that's what this board is committed to doing. I would suspect that on the whole, we're going to find exceptional outcomes, but for any student that's in a school that isn't prioritizing the focus on our ESE students, we can do better, and we will. So with that, we're going to adjourn this meeting, but before you all step away, before the board steps away, we've adjourned this meeting, but I do need to call to order a regular school board meeting. The meeting is called to order. Let me do a quick roll call. I think we still have everybody with us. Member Gallo?
Present.
Member Lopez? Member Lopez, are you still with us? We have-
Present, yes.
Thank you. Member Cobert?
Present, Chair.
Vice Chair Gould?
Present.
Member Felder?
Present.
Member Castrodental? Member Castrodental? Okay, we may have lost Member Castrodental. Member Byrd?
Present.
And likewise, I'm present. President, oh boy. Not in anybody's right mind. Woo. Pursuant to section 286.011, subparagraph 8, Florida statutes, the School Board of Orange County, Florida will meet in an executive session to discuss the pending litigation of TC, individually and as parent and natural guardian of WC, a minor, versus Orange County Public Schools, DOAH case number 21-0000031. The statute requires us to open the meeting in the public and then adjourn to our closed executive session. It's estimated that this attorney-client session will take approximately 60 minutes. Those attending will be myself, Chair, Pam Gould, Vice Chair, Angie Gallo, School Board Member, Joanna Lopez, School Board Member, Linda Cobert, School Board Member, Vicki Elaine Felder, School Board Member, Member Castor Dental, School Board Member, Melissa Byrd, School Board Member, and Dr. Jenkins, Superintendent, Amy Enval, School Board's General Counsel, Sarah Corin, Staff Attorney, and the Court Reporter. Once the executive session is over, we will reconvene the public meeting by opening the door And with no further business, we'll conclude the meeting. Thank you, and we will now adjourn to the conference room E for the executive session. Thank you all who attended for being here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for taking the time.